Hey guys, tonight we slip through a crack in time and wake up in a world where even the air feels heavy, as if it knows something terrible is about to happen. Imagine walking through the narrow, twisting lanes of Tudor London. Cobblestones slick from rain, oil lamps flickering, and the usual chatter of the night strangely hushed. Somewhere a dog barks, but otherwise you hear only the shuffle of your own footsteps and the distant clang of a church bell tolling midnight. There's a strange tang in the air, something sharp and metallic, mixed with the earthy scent of wet woolen horses. In this moment, you don't know it yet, but a sickness is moving among you, so silent that you could brush past a doomed neighbour and never realise the danger. It's not the Black Death, though that old monster lurks in memory. No, this is something new, faster, more capricious, and for a while even more terrifying, sweating sickness. And just to keep it real, let's be honest, you probably won't survive this one. So before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 a.m, or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey. Together, here on Timeless Sleep. You step carefully past the bulk of a slumbering horse, its breath steaming in the cool air. The city is restless. Even at this hour you can feel it, a sense that something is off. That people are staying inside not because of the rain, but because fear is prowling the streets. You hear it in whispers behind shuttered windows, in the hurried footsteps of a merchant racing home earlier than usual, clutching a bundle to his chest as if it contained something precious. And it does. A loaf of bread, a wedge of cheese, and the desperate hope that keeping his family fed will be enough to keep them safe from whatever stalks the night. That's the first thing you notice about the arrival of the sweating sickness. It doesn't make a grand entrance. There's no parade of rats, no showers of frogs, no ominous eclipse. Instead, it slips through the city as quietly as a draft beneath a door, unnoticed until it's already claimed its first victim. A merchant's apprentice, barely 16, is found sprawled across a sack of flour in his master's storeroom. He'd been healthy that morning, laughing and stealing bites of bread. By noon, he's shivering uncontrollably. His skin shines with sweat, his breathing shallow and fast. By dusk, he's gone, leaving behind only a sticky imprint on the rough-hewn boards. His family doesn't even have time to mourn properly. By the following day, 2 more are taken. His mother, his little sister, both gone almost before anyone can say a prayer. In the beginning, people try to explain it away. It must be a bad batch of ale, or a chill caught from standing in the rain too long. Maybe it's just one of those fevers that pass through the city every so often, burning bright and then fading without a trace. But the city is too closely packed, too hungry for gossip, and the deaths are too quick to ignore. Within days, rumours are everywhere. Some say the sickness came off a foreign ship, hidden in bolts of silk or barrels of spice. Others blame the stench from the Thames, always ready to accuse the river of every ill that befalls the city. You stand outside a baker's shop listening as a group of women argue in hushed voices about the cause. One is certain it's punishment for the city's many sins, gambling, gluttony, and the shocking number of shoes left outside doorways at night. Another swears it's the work of foreign sorcerers, jealous of London's growing wealth. Still another mutters that the king must have angered God, and that this is just the beginning of something worse. But for every outlandish explanation, there's a chill of genuine terror. The people of England have seen death before. Famine, war, and plague are old acquaintances. But this is different. The sweating sickness doesn't move slowly like the Black Death, creeping from town to town with the relentless patience of a wolf. Instead, it pounces. A person can be healthy at breakfast, sweating and feverish by lunch, and dead before sunset. Sometimes the unlucky soul barely has time to stumble to bed before collapsing. Eyes rolling, muscles trembling, sweat soaking through mattress and blanket alike. You hear it said, maybe from the mouth of a tipsy tanner, maybe from your own trembling lips, that the sickness strikes so fast you barely have time to whisper a goodbye. As night deepens, you walk the length of a quiet lane. Above you, the stars are blotted out by a low, bruised sky. Somewhere a child cries, her mother soothing her with an old lullaby. The song hangs in the air, fragile as a spider's web. You pause to listen, letting the melody wrap around you. In another world, you think, this might be comforting. Here, it's just another reminder of how thin the walls are between life and death. In a cramped tavern, you catch sight of a priest, his robe stained with travel and worry. He's talking in low tones to the tavern keeper, warning him to keep his doors barred after dark. There's talk of prayers, of penance, of the need to confess sins before it's too late. But even as he speaks, you can see the nervous way his hands flutter at the edge of his sleeves, as if trying to shake off invisible drops of sweat. The city tries to fight back. Church bells ring out in endless vigils, summoning the faithful to prayer. Rich merchants pay handsomely for amulets, bits of bone, dried herbs, pieces of iron shaped into protective charms. In the marketplace, a woman with wild eyes sells bottles of sweat water, claiming it's been blessed by a saint. You watch as she presses one into the hand of a nervous nobleman, who clutches it to his chest as if it holds all his hopes. All the while the sickness moves on, uncaring. You see it in the faces of the living, eyes red-rimmed, hands trembling, voices hoarse from too many whispered prayers. The dead are taken away quickly, buried in shallow graves outside the city walls. There's no time for ceremony. People fear even to touch the bodies lest the sweat find them next. In the dark corners of the city, a different kind of commerce flourishes. Some people sell cures they claim will ward off the sweats. Roasted onions worn around the neck, vinegar-soaked cloths pressed to the forehead, even a slug of strong ale to warm the blood. None of it seems to help, but the money changes hands all the same. A few people even start making up rhymes about the sickness, as if turning it into a joke might steal its power. You catch one, muttered by a group of children skipping rope in the shadows. "Sweat, sweat, go away, come again another day." Or "Never, if you please, we'd rather keep our cheese." But beneath the forced laughter, you sense real fear. Even the children don't play outside for long anymore. The city's heartbeat slows, its people withdrawing into themselves, hoping that if they keep quiet and stay inside, the sickness will pass them by. You pass a row of tenements where the windows are dark, shutters closed tight. Behind one, a young mother rocks back and forth, her hands pressed to her face. Her husband lies on the bed, drenched in sweat, his breath shallow and uneven. She whispers prayers, bargaining with God, promising anything if he'll just let her husband live. Across the city, similar scenes play out in dozens of homes. Each is a tiny island of dread, adrift in the sea of the city's unease. At the palace, rumours swirl that even the king is afraid. Servants scurry through back corridors carrying fresh linens and strong-smelling herbs to ward off infection. No one speaks above a whisper. Everyone knows that if the sickness can reach the royal court, then nowhere is safe. You remember hearing that in times of plague, the king would sometimes flee the city, retreating to a country manor in hopes that distance would save him. But the sweating sickness travels fast, and there are whispers that not even the fastest horse can outrun it. One of the strangest things about sweating sickness is how little warning it gives. People seem fine, busy, bustling, even laughing, and then suddenly they're sweating, shaking, and gasping for breath. You hear stories of men collapsing in the street, women fainting at market stalls, children falling silent mid-game, all gone in the span of a few hours. It's as if the sickness is a shadow, following just out of sight, always ready to pounce. Some say the only way to survive is to act as if nothing is happening. Keep working, keep praying, keep living as best you can. Others choose the opposite approach, locking themselves away, refusing to open the door even for friends and family. A few run to the countryside, hoping the open fields and fresh air will protect them. But wherever you go, the fear follows. It clings to your clothes, hides in the creases of your hands, lingers in every whispered conversation. At the end of a long day, you sit by a window and look out at the city. The lamps flicker in the damp, the streets are empty. Somewhere, an owl calls. You find yourself wondering what tomorrow will bring, if you'll wake to find the sickness gone or discover it waiting on your doorstep. There's no way to know. All you can do is wait, and hope, and listen as the quiet night stretches on. One last thing before sleep takes you. Historians still argue whether the sweating sickness was spread by close contact, contaminated food, or some mysterious miasma in the air. Some even wonder if it was really a single disease, or a series of outbreaks lumped together by frightened chroniclers. The truth remains as elusive as the sickness itself, always just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of history. But for now, you close your eyes, pull your blanket tight, and remind yourself to breathe slow and deep. The night is long, but you are not alone, and as you drift off, you hope that when morning comes, the sickness will have passed you by. Dawn comes, but it brings no comfort. The first grey light of morning falls on empty lanes and shuttered windows. You wake not to the crow of the rooster or the bell of the church, but to an eerie hush that seems to swallow all the usual clatter of London. If you listen hard, you might hear footsteps. Someone hurried, careful not to draw attention, tiptoeing to check on a neighbour, or perhaps to see if a rival's household is still breathing. Last night, another house lost half its family. It's whispered about already, even though the day is barely begun. A woman sweeping her doorstep glances nervously at the door next to hers. You spot her tugging a cloth tighter around her mouth, though she knows, deep down, no amount of wool will save her if the sweat comes for her kin. Her neighbour's windows remain tightly closed. A ribbon tied to the latch, a silent sign, sickness inside. Nobody will visit, not even the priest, not today. The baker's shop stays closed. Bread, the city's daily hope, is now a luxury. Even the hungry stray cats, always bold and persistent, seem hesitant, skirting the shadows rather than begging at every threshold. The pigeons are left in peace for once, pecking undisturbed on the deserted square. You try to recall the last time the city felt normal. Was it just a week ago when market stalls were bustling and apprentices hollered over cabbage prices? Now, not even the loudest peddler dares to shout. The city has learned to hold its breath. Rumours travel faster than any horse. They say the sickness is no respecter of wealth, youth, or prayer. One tale claims a whole row of fine houses emptied in a single day, the streets outside swept clean by servants who never return. Another rumour insists that those with red hair are immune, a hopeful lie, repeated by ginger-headed children with nervous pride. No one laughs, not really. Too many have seen the truth. By the docks, the air tastes of salt and rot. A merchant tries to bribe a boatman for passage out of London, waving coins that tremble in his sweating palm. But the boatman shakes his head. He's heard too many stories of travellers collapsing mid-voyage, their bodies dumped overboard to avoid landing with the curse. If you want to leave, you'll have to walk. And outside the city there are as many dangers as within. Outlaws, hunger, and the suspicion of strangers who bar their doors to all newcomers just in case. It's strange how quickly suspicion has become the city's second language. You watch a group of women at the public well, each carefully maintaining distance. No more gossip or laughter. Now, every cough is met with flinching. Children are shooed away before they can touch the bucket's handle. If someone looks pale or rubs their neck, eyes dart sideways. An old man, wrapped tight in his cloak, whispers to anyone who will listen that he's seen 3 funerals this week already, and the gravedigger's running out of space. Not far from the well, a tailor pins a note to his door, closed for mourning. Whether for his family or his business, no one asks. Some say it's best not to know. Elsewhere, a nobleman's carriage lurches past, splashing through puddles. The horses are whipped mercilessly, urged onward through narrow streets cleared by fear more than deference. You catch a glimpse inside. A boy, no more than 10, stares wide-eyed from the window. Next to him, his mother clutches a scented handkerchief, face pale and drawn. She presses it to the boy's lips whenever he coughs. The scent is meant to ward off the disease, but the boy looks no better for it. A procession of priests winds through another lane, chanting softly, swinging censers that leave trails of sharp-smelling smoke. Their prayers are familiar, yet people close their shutters as they pass. No one wants to draw attention. No one wants to be the next house marked with a ribbon. As the sun climbs higher, the city grows restless. The old routines, bread at dawn, market at noon, prayers at dusk, are all broken now. Instead, you see new rituals. People sprinkle vinegar on their thresholds, carry sprigs of rosemary or rue, even smear their faces with pungent ointments said to keep death at bay. There's talk of a plague doctor, a man in strange bird-like robes with a beaked mask filled with herbs, but he's a story borrowed from the continent. In England, no one dares look so foolish, at least not yet. Here, the cures are as local as the fear. A young woman stands at her window, tears streaming down her face. She's just finished scrubbing the sill with stale beer. Another useless charm. Inside, her brother sweats and shivers on his bed, eyes unfocused. His breathing is rough, shallow, and she counts every exhale as if her own life depends on it. Every few minutes she whispers a prayer, not to be spared, but for it to end quickly, one way or another. Down the road, a group of boys dart from alley to alley, pockets full of small stones and knuckle bones. Children always find ways to play, even in the shadow of death. They sing a rhyme as they skip, something about a sweating king and a cold, empty grave. Their mothers scold them from the doorways, but none dare come closer. You pass by a once busy inn, now silent. The sign swings on rusty hinges, and through the grimy windows you spot the innkeeper sitting alone at a table, staring at a half-empty mug. She doesn't bother to stand as you pass, doesn't greet you. She looks as though she's been sitting there for hours or days. Rumour has it her husband was the first to fall ill, her daughter the next. Now she waits for her own symptoms, as if daring the sickness to come for her. That's the strangest part, how quickly fear becomes familiarity. The city adapts, in a way only people who have stared death in the face can. Some residents leave, heading for country relatives with hopeful bundles and little else. Others stay put, convinced that moving only invites danger. In a world that can change in a single breath, routine becomes its own fragile shield. You notice the small details, someone crossing themselves before opening a door, or pausing a moment longer at the statue of a saint on the corner. When a bell rings for a funeral, no one looks up anymore. It's just another note in the city's new music. Historians still argue whether sweating sickness moved from person to person, or if it rode in on fleas, rats, or even the very air itself. Some point to the way it seemed to strike certain families or neighbourhoods in clusters, while sparing others almost entirely. There are stories of servants dying while their masters lived, and vice versa. Others think it followed the course of rivers and roads, passing from market town to city as goods changed hands. Even today, the true cause remains a puzzle, with theories multiplying like shadows at dusk. Outside the city, life is no less anxious. Villages set guards on their roads, barring travellers for fear of the plague. Those who do slip through are met with suspicion or outright hostility. Some towns post lookouts to signal when a stranger approaches, sending up a cloud of crows or banging pots as warning. The unlucky are turned away, left to wander the countryside in search of shelter. Yet even here in the fields and forests the sickness finds its way. A shepherd returns home to find his family ill. A milkmaid, usually so sturdy, collapses while tending her cows. In a nearby manor, the lady of the house refuses all visitors, ordering meals to be left at the door. She has not spoken to another soul in days save the cook, who whispers stories of her mistress's nightly prayers and the candles burned to stubs. Meanwhile, the city's rulers try to keep order. Proclamations are nailed to posts, warning against gatherings, urging cleanliness, suggesting the burning of sweet-smelling herbs. Some of these rules are followed, Most are ignored. You see a cluster of men at the Guildhall arguing about whether to close the markets entirely, and whether anyone would dare enforce such a rule. Money still needs to change hands, after all. Hunger, it seems, is more persistent than even the sweating sickness. A cart rolls by, carrying its load to the burial ground outside the walls. There's no wailing, no parade. The bodies are wrapped tight, faces covered, names whispered by a tired priest who barely pauses in his muttered prayers. It's not that people don't care, it's simply that there's no time, and too much loss numbs even the deepest pain. You pause in the quiet of the cathedral. The great stone space feels colder than usual. You kneel for a moment, unsure whether you're praying for yourself, your family, or just for something, anything, to break the city's feverish silence. Light spills through stained glass, colouring the stone floor in shades of blood and gold. Somewhere, a choir boy coughs, and the sound echoes up into the vaulted arches. You leave a coin in the poor box before stepping back into the day. Every step feels uncertain, as if the ground itself might shift beneath your feet. The world has become unpredictable, every breath measured, every cough a potential omen. Still, life goes on in fits and starts. A midwife delivers a baby at dawn, hands trembling as she wipes sweat from her brow. A fisherman hauls in his nets and shares his catch with neighbours who have nothing left to trade. A young couple huddles together in a tiny room, sharing stories to ward off the dark. Above it all, the city waits. You feel the weight of history pressing down, of all the generations who lived and died in these same crooked streets, who faced their own plagues and fears. Somehow that knowledge is both terrifying and comforting. You are not the first to walk this path, and you will not be the last. Now, the pulse of fear isn't just in London, but stretching out, north to York, south toward the Channel, weaving through farmlands, brushing the walls of manor houses and curling beneath the wooden beams of humble cottages. You don't need a map to sense how panic spreads. It clings to the air, sharper than wood smoke and just as impossible to hold. As the weeks pass, the stories multiply, each one a grim variation on a single theme. Sudden sweats, frantic prayers, and then too often silence. By now you notice how the rhythm of daily life has changed. No one lingers in the square. Bartering is brief and distant, voices muffled behind scarves and sleeves. Children, always the boldest, have become furtive, peering from behind doorposts, inventing games that let them keep their distance, hopping on one foot across the yard, racing shadows rather than each other. Even the dogs have learned to avoid strangers, tails low, keeping to the sides of streets where once they begged for scraps or mischief. At night, you lie in a cold bed and listen to the city's new music, the creak of wagons moving quietly after dark, the occasional stifled sob, and above all the deep quiet between these sounds. A quiet so total, it feels like even the wind holds its breath. Sometimes, a bell tolls, not for church, but for the dead, one ring for each soul, until the tally is lost in the darkness. Across the river, in the finer houses, the rules are different, but the dread is the same. Rich tapestries are taken down and scrubbed with vinegar, sheets boiled until they nearly disintegrate. Chambermaids are sent away at the slightest cough, and the kitchens are suddenly thick with the smell of burned herbs and onions. Nobles gather in their halls and argue over what to do. Should they flee to the country? Lock themselves in? Some try both, packing a dozen relatives and as many trunks into coaches, only to find the gates to the next town locked tight. Even gold can't open all doors now. Every day brings more strange remedies. People wear garlic necklaces, stuff their ears with wool, and sleep with iron knives beneath their pillows. A brewer down the lane insists that his strongest ale will keep the sweat at bay, so long as you drink it warm before dawn, and never let your feet touch the floor when you rise from bed. Someone else swears by rosewater and sells it for a price fit for a king. Still, the deaths continue. The city's healers are overwhelmed, though most will admit quietly that they are as frightened and baffled as anyone else. A learned physician, A man who's read every Latin text he could get his hands on, tries bleeding his patients, or dosing them with concoctions of rhubarb and wormwood. Sometimes his patients live. Sometimes they die within hours, sweating through blankets and straw. Their final moments a confusion of fever and despair. When the sweating sickness first struck, some whispered it was a curse brought by soldiers returning from the wars. Others said it was the devil's work or retribution for forgotten sins. But now the theories grow wilder. One priest preaches that the sweat's a punishment for pride, pointing out that it often strikes those with means, merchants, scholars, wealthy craftsmen, while the poorest, living in filth and squalor, sometimes survive untouched. Of course, no one is truly spared. The line between rich and poor becomes blurry in the face of fear. You hear a story, perhaps true, perhaps only a frightened mind's invention, of a lord who locked his household away, posting guards at every door. For a week they ate only what could be grown or caught on their own land, letting no one in or out. Then one morning the lord's daughter wakes sweating, gasping for air. By nightfall the household is in chaos. By week's end the manor stands empty, the gardens overgrown. When neighbours finally dare approach, they find only silence and a cluster of half-starved cats in the yard. Somehow the city finds ways to mark these losses. A chalk mark is drawn on doors where the sickness has struck. When enough marks appear on a street, people simply stop going there. Deliveries cease, messages go undelivered. At first, neighbours leave food or water at the doorstep just in case the living survive, but soon even this ritual fades. The city shrinks as its people turn inward, each house its own fortress, and yet life persists. You walk past a carpenter repairing a broken cartwheel, whistling softly under his breath. A girl delivers eggs, balancing the basket carefully so none touch her own skin. The cathedral bells ring on Sundays, summoning the faithful who pray from a distance, kneeling just outside the doors. There are weddings, hurried and small, and children born too. Babies whose first lullabies are sung in voices hoarse from fear, but sung all the same. Here and there you find proof that the old ways survive, if only as memory. On market day, a single fiddler plays in the corner of the square, his tune a little wild and desperate, but enough to make a few heads turn. Someone bakes gingerbread and hands it out to passing children. For strength, she says. The children smile, if only for a moment, and somewhere, hidden in the press of the crowd, a boy sneezes and everyone freezes. Before, a sneeze was just a sneeze, but now it could be a harbinger of grief. Beyond the city, the countryside is no safer. In some villages, strangers are chased off with sticks or stones, while in others, desperation breeds kindness. A loaf of bread left on a doorstep, a silent nod to a passing widow. Fields must still be ploughed, animals tended. If a farmer falls sick, his family works twice as hard, hands chapped raw, prayers whispered with each seed planted. One midsummer morning a rumour arrives on the breeze. The king himself has fled London for Windsor Castle. Some say he travels with a train of doctors and priests, each carrying relics and cures from every corner of Christendom. Others scoff, insisting no king can outrun the sweat. The truth, as always, is hard to pin down. But the idea that even the most powerful are afraid, it makes the fear feel strangely just, or at least universal. Historians still debate what made the sweating sickness so uniquely terrifying. Was it the speed, the way it struck without warning, turning a lively dinner table to a place of mourning by sunrise? Or the mystery, how even now no one can say for certain what caused it? Some modern scholars suggest a rodent-borne virus, others a mutation of influenza, still others point to a perfect storm of humidity, diet, and medieval hygiene, or lack thereof. The debate is as unsettled as the disease itself. In the taverns, those who still dare gather pass the time with stories and superstitions. One man boasts he survived the sweat by sleeping on a bed of straw soaked in cider. Another claims that eating only onions kept his family safe. These stories mingle with darker rumours of whole parishes abandoned, of carts piled high with the dead, of clergy so overwhelmed that they begin to fear their own prayers are useless. A few see opportunity in disaster. An enterprising widow takes to selling potions she swears are blessed by a saint. Her miracle water costs a penny a drop and tastes suspiciously of old apples. A tinker offers amulets made from sweatstone, which he claims to have found in a dream. Desperate people pay, hoping for luck if not salvation. And always there is debate. Was this curse sent from God? Did it come from the ground itself, rising up in the city's foul air and dirty water? Some say the sweat arrives every time there is political strife or war, others that it follows the comet seen last winter, blazing in the sky like an omen. The truth is, no answer brings comfort. As the weeks wear on, hope becomes a currency more precious than gold. Someone who recovers from the sickness is treated like a marvel, paraded before neighbours as living proof that survival is possible. Their stories are told and retold, how they kept cool or hot or drank a certain tea. Whether these methods truly worked or were simply luck is impossible to know. But people cling to these tales, passing them down like heirlooms. You sense the city slowly beginning to exhale. The deaths do not stop, but they slow. The sickness, as suddenly as it came, recedes. No one cheers. There is no triumph, no festival. Just a wary return to the ordinary. Bread baked, markets reopened, shutters unbarred. The memory lingers, though, a chill that will not quite fade. When the sweating sickness fades at last, people try to forget. Some do, finding solace in the return of normalcy. Others never shake the memory. Children grow up with a new respect for quiet, for caution, for the fine line between everyday life and disaster. The world did not end, but it changed, subtly, enduringly. There's a final bitter lesson here. As the city's wounds scab over and heal, as laughter returns in hesitant waves, there remains a sense that nothing is guaranteed. The sweat may be gone, but the fear it brought of things unseen and unstoppable never truly leaves. And that, perhaps, is why its memory lingers still, shadowy and powerful, even as other plagues come and go. You wake to the pounding of rain against the shutters, that steady, insistent rhythm that drowns out the city's unease for a few moments. Outside, the streets glisten with puddles, and for a fleeting second you almost forget the reason so many doors remain shut. The windows dim and muffled. Then, just as suddenly, you remember. The sweating sickness is still here, and the rain, for all its cleansing promise, does nothing to chase it away. It's been days, or maybe weeks, no one seems quite sure anymore, since the sweats arrived in your part of town. The passage of time has grown slippery. The calendar that hung in the baker's shop is gone, and the bell that once marked the hours tolls now for funerals, if it tolls at all. You've learned to measure days by small private rituals, the changing colour of the sky, the way bread goes stale on the shelf, the slow, uncertain healing of a bruise on your shin. This morning, the first thing you hear is the news that another household has fallen. 4, maybe 5, swept away in a single night. They were healthy, robust people, at least so it seemed to everyone who knew them. One moment they were passing a cup of ale at supper, the next they were writhing with fever, sweat pouring off them, faces ashen and eyes glassy with terror. Some say the illness shows mercy by taking its victims quickly. Others say it's the swiftness that makes it so cruel, giving families no time to prepare, no hope of goodbyes or last confessions. You make your way out into the world, rain slipping under your collar, the air thick with the tang of wet earth and something else. Something metallic and strange, a scent that now haunts your dreams. The streets feel wider than you remember, empty but for the occasional scurrying figure. No one lingers, no one stops to chat. Each person moves with purpose, head down, as if chased by invisible dogs. In the market square, a few desperate vendors hawk their goods from beneath makeshift awnings. Gone are the cheerful calls and bold boasts about the quality of the apples or the freshness of the fish. Now it's all about speed and distance. coins exchanged at arm's length, bread and cheese slid across tables with barely a word. If anyone coughs or rubs their brow, others scatter, crossing themselves, muttering half-remembered prayers. You watch as an elderly woman buys a bunch of leeks, her hands trembling as she counts out the coins. She wipes each one on her apron before tucking them into a purse hung around her neck. Her face is pinched and pale, and you wonder how many nights she's lain awake, listening for the telltale signs of sickness in her own home. Beside her, a boy not yet 10 stares at a heap of turnips, lips moving in silent calculation. Enough for supper tonight, perhaps. But what about tomorrow? On the far side of the square, the apothecary's shop is besieged by a crowd, everyone desperate for remedies, for anything that might keep the sweats at bay. The apothecary, a thin, harried man with ink stains on his cuffs, waves handfuls of dried herbs promising hope in every bundle. Angelica root, guaranteed to ward off evil humours, dried marjoram, the king's own favourite. The crowd surges forward, money and fear changing hands in equal measure. Someone swears by a concoction of honey and vinegar, another by boiling wild thyme and breathing in the fumes. You hear that the nobility are rubbing their walls with garlic, that priests have started carrying posies of wormwood and lavender as they walk the sick lanes. At the edges of the square, a tinker tries to trade protective talismans, made of odd bits of tin and bone, some shaped like saints, others like suns, all clutched desperately by the faithful and the fearful alike. Historians still argue whether these odd cures and rituals did anything at all, or if they simply offered the illusion of control in a world that had become unrecognisable. You hear one learned neighbour argue that the mind is half the body's health, and perhaps there is some comfort in the familiar, even if it does nothing against the true enemy. As the day wears on, the rain slackens, but the mood remains tense. A pair of city officials move from door to door, marking those homes where illness has struck. Their faces are hidden by scarves, hands gloved despite the warmth. Each house they visit is left with a symbol, a crude chalk mark on the lintel, a branch of yew tied to the handle. These are warnings and memorials both, and you see people cross the street rather than pass too near. Inside your own home, the rituals of cleanliness have become almost holy. Basins of water scented with rosemary stand by every door. Cloaks are aired daily, boots scrubbed and left to dry near the fire. Meals are simple and spare. Meat, when you can get it, is boiled until it's nearly unrecognisable. You recall the old woman in the square, and you wonder how many others now survive on a diet of turnip broth and hope. Still, hunger is not the only enemy. The true terror lies in uncertainty. Each day you watch your family for signs, the faintest shiver, a sudden pallor, a sigh that lasts too long. If someone wakes drenched in sweat, you go rigid. All your careful rituals, all the prayers whispered over soup and bread, all the yew branches on the door, none of them matter in that moment. The room seems to shrink as everyone looks for the next sign. A trembling hand, a quickened breath, a glassy stare. It doesn't matter if it's your father, your little sister, your wife, or even you. Fear makes no distinctions. The first instinct is always to hope. Perhaps it's just a bad dream, or a fever from the cold rain. Maybe it's only exhaustion, but deep down you already know. The sweating sickness doesn't announce itself politely. If you are the one who wakes clammy, you may try to hide it at first. Maybe you move quietly, hoping the others don't notice your shaking hands or the sheen on your forehead. You say nothing, telling yourself it will pass, but your body betrays you. Chills follow the sweat so intense your teeth rattle in your skull. A pain lances across your chest, your back, and suddenly you are gasping. The others gather, frightened but drawn by love and worry, and you see their faces harden as they recognize what is happening. Some families try to care for the stricken, washing their faces, offering sips of water, reciting psalms and clutching hands. Others, out of terror or hard-earned experience, keep their distance, sometimes even isolating the sick in another room, a barn or a shed. If you're left alone, the silence is crushing. broken only by your ragged breath and the dull ache in your limbs. Sometimes a loved one will risk everything to sit beside you, murmuring comfort, swabbing your brow with cool cloths, praying that some shred of the old cures will prove true. If you watch a loved one fall ill, there is no time to adjust, no grace period for sorrow. In a matter of hours, the person you knew is transformed, sweating, shivering, their voice rasping, sometimes delirious. You notice how quickly the colour drains from their skin, how their eyes grow wild. The books say death can come within a day, sometimes within 3 hours. You wait, torn between dread and desperate hope. Every sound is magnified, the fluttering of their breath, the whisper of sweat pooling on the pillow, the ticking of your own anxious heart. Sometimes there is a moment of cruel hope. The fever breaks and the sweating stops, and for a moment you let yourself believe the danger is past. You give thanks, even dare to smile. But too often this is only a lull before the final collapse. The patient's pulse weakens, their breathing slows, and soon all that remains is the echo of your last whispered comfort. For those who survive, it is a mystery. Some recover, fragile as a moth, never quite the same. Others slip away so quietly it's as if they never really left the fever at all. This is the rhythm that marks your days now. Watching, waiting, grieving, repeating. You are not alone. All across the city, across the country, thousands live the same cycle. The carpenters, who once built cradles, now craft coffins. Tailors sew burial shrouds as often as new tunics. The blacksmith sharpens axes and repairs iron grills for doors, not for fear of thieves, but to bar out illness. Priests move through the lanes, blessing the living, comforting the dying, sometimes burying more souls in a week than in all the previous months combined. Even so, hope is not entirely extinguished. You see it in the way people band together, sometimes in small and unexpected ways. A neighbour leaves a bowl of broth on your step, knowing you cannot repay. Someone chalks a cheerful message on a wall. The sun will rise again. Old stories are dusted off. Tales of ancestors who endured worse. Famines, fires, wars, and somehow survived. These become a new kind of prayer, a whispered promise passed from one trembling soul to the next. There's another kind of hope too, a kind that borders on superstition. Some households adopt elaborate routines to ward off the sweats. Windows are opened every morning, regardless of the weather, to chase away the bad air. Brooms are left outside the front door, bristles up, to confuse wandering spirits. A single candle burns in every window from dusk to dawn. Children are made to recite odd little rhymes before sleep, charms against nightmares and illness. These rituals are part magic, part habit. But in a world where science fails, habit is a comfort. Yet for every story of kindness or courage, there are tales of panic and selfishness. In some neighbourhoods, people barricade themselves inside, refusing to answer pleas for help, even from kin. There are reports, whispered, never spoken aloud, of sick children left alone to die, their cries fading behind locked doors. Hunger stalks the alleys as surely as sickness. Food grows scarce as farmers avoid the city and labourers fall ill. The lines at the baker's and the mill grow longer each day, the crowd's restless, tempers short. It is in these moments, as fear breeds suspicion, that the old scapegoats return. Some blame strangers, travellers, peddlers, the poor from the next parish. Others whisper that the sickness is a punishment for hidden sins, for pride or greed or the secret envy of a neighbour's fortune. Occasionally mobs form, angry, frightened, looking for anyone to blame. The wise keep their heads down, their voices low. Meanwhile, the learned and powerful are no less anxious. The king's physicians debate endlessly, poring over every case, scribbling notes and disagreeing in polite Latin. Is it a poison in the air? A putrefaction of the humours? A contagion spread by touch? Or a punishment sent by God? No one knows, and the court's frantic proclamations, clean your homes, avoid the sick, trust the Lord, are met with a mixture of hope, scepticism, and dark humour. Historians still argue whether the treatments of the day did more harm than good. Some recommend bleeding and purging, convinced that bad blood is the enemy. Others urge cooling the body, packing the patient in ice or immersing them in chilly baths. Herbalists tout the virtues of sage and marigold, while astrologers plot the positions of planets, looking for cosmic explanations. A few advise complete isolation, but in most homes this is impossible. You share a bed, a bowl, a single, smoky room. Even the clergy cannot agree. Some priests urge repentance, preaching fire and brimstone from the pulpit, warning that only prayer will turn God's wrath aside. Others are gentler, promising mercy, reminding their flocks of Christ's compassion for the sick. A handful risk everything, tending the dying, their hands raw from washing, their eyes red from sleepless nights. Sometimes these good souls fall ill themselves, and the city mourns them as saints. One strange tale makes its way through the streets. A story of a young woman who, it's said, survived the sweats by drinking nothing but goat's milk and sleeping on a bed of thyme. Whether true or not, mothers across the city begin to copy her routine, even those who never owned a goat or a patch of thyme before. For a while, it seems as if every rooftop has a sprig of the herb drying in the sun, every cupboard a stash of sour milk. People cling to such stories, not because they believe necessarily, but because hope itself can be healing. You begin to notice changes in yourself too. Sleep becomes a rare and fragile thing. Each morning brings a careful self-examination. How do you feel? Is your pulse quick? Are you too hot, too cold? Any ache or shiver sets your heart pounding. You become attuned to every bodily sensation, every small discomfort, each one a possible sign of doom. And yet, life goes on, in fits and starts. Someone jokes, quietly, that Londoners have always been stubborn, that the same city that survived fire and famine will not be undone by a little sweat. There is laughter sometimes when the danger feels far enough away, at a slip in the mud, a pigeon stealing a hunk of bread, a child's dogged determination to play in the rain. People gather in doorways, voices low, exchanging news, gossip and cautious encouragement. Small kindnesses bloom like wildflowers. A borrowed loaf, a shared candle, a whispered prayer. One evening, you walk along the riverbank and watch the sun set behind the rooftops. The world feels suspended, poised between disaster and deliverance. You remember tales of older plagues, how the city emptied out, how the grass grew tall in the streets. This time, the emptiness is less visible but more profound, a loneliness that sits in your bones. You wonder how long it will last, if things will ever be the same again. As darkness falls, you hear the distant sound of singing, a hymn perhaps, or a lullaby. It drifts across the rooftops, rising and falling on the wind. For a moment, you let yourself be comforted. Tomorrow, the sickness may return. Tonight, there is still hope. Historians still debate whether the sweating sickness was truly a single disease, or a cluster of different fevers and maladies. Some believe it was a kind of hantavirus, spread by rodents or contaminated grain. Others insist it was a mutated form of influenza, brought on by a perfect storm of poor sanitation, damp weather, and crowded living. There are even those who wonder if it was an early form of psychological epidemic, a collective terror that made the city sick. The truth remains elusive, lost to time. But as you drift into uneasy sleep, you hold fast to one certainty. You are not alone. All across England, others lie awake, listening to the rain, waiting for morning. You promise yourself that you will keep going, that you will care for your family, your neighbours, your city. Even as fear tightens its grip, even as loss darkens your doorstep, you refuse to surrender hope. For in the end, it is hope, fragile, stubborn, and enduring, that carries you through the sweats and into whatever tomorrow may bring. The world around you now feels split, like a curtain has fallen between the life you once knew and the quiet dread you live in now. You still wake, still eat, still move through the days, but something invisible has shifted in the marrow of every moment. The simplest acts, brushing your hair, lighting the morning fire, dipping bread into soup, feel like rituals to keep death at bay. And yet, no one says the word plague aloud, not in full. Even those who whisper about it do so with a glance over the shoulder, as if the sickness can hear its own name and come running. You step into the street again, noticing the faint tracks left by last night's rainfall, wagon wheels pressed into mud, the delicate prints of a cat that wandered through and found no welcome at any door. The quiet is less startling than before. You're used to it now, the way you've grown used to the ever-present smell of boiled herbs and stale vinegar, to the itchy sting of garlic tied to your wrist, to the cloying sweetness of posies stuffed into every corner of the house. Some parts of the city have gone completely silent. Whole rows of houses are locked up, doors barred and windows dark. In some cases, the occupants have fled. In others, the occupants never left, but they no longer move inside. These houses are spoken of in the same way one might speak of ruins or battlefields. People pass them quickly. Children dare each other to run up and touch the door, then shriek and run away, breathless with terror and thrill. Adults don't laugh. They pull the children back, scolding sharply, and mutter about inviting curses. One house in particular draws your eye today. You'd passed it 100 times in brighter months. An apothecary's shop with a painted sign of a pestle and mortar. Shelves always full of curious jars and bundles of drying plants. Now the windows are streaked with grime, and the shutters hang crooked. The door is marked, not with chalk this time, but a thick smear of red paint. A warning? A prayer? No one knows who painted it. No one has seen the apothecary for days. You walk on, boots scuffing over the cobbles. The church tower looms ahead, but its bells no longer ring for every soul. There are too many now. The priests have fallen silent, their voices hoarse from so many sermons, so many blessings spoken over cold bodies. One priest collapsed mid-service last week, drenched in sweat. They carried him out wrapped in linen, his congregation watching in stunned silence. Near the church, a small crowd has gathered. This is rare now, unusual enough to make you cautious. You inch closer, curiosity outweighing caution. It's a boy, barefoot, wrapped in a threadbare tunic too thin for the weather, hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. He isn't coughing or shivering, though. He's singing, loud, clear, and bold. It's a hymn, but not one of the usual ones. His voice rises above the muttering of the crowd, and you realize it's a hymn of joy, of survival. People murmur, unsure how to feel. Some cross themselves, others shake their heads. But no one stops him. The boy sings to the sky, as if to remind the heavens that not everyone has bowed their head in defeat. You feel something loosen in your chest, a tightness you hadn't realized was there. A woman places a copper coin at the boy's feet, and soon others follow. When he finishes, he doesn't bow. He just smiles, turns, and walks away. You think of that hymn all day. It stays with you through the tasks that have become your new routine. Checking for fevers, cleaning the doorknobs with sour wine, boiling every scrap of cloth. You hear it again as you fetch water from the pump, careful not to let the handle touch your skin. And when you return home to find your little sister with flushed cheeks and a trembling voice, the memory of it nearly breaks you. But her fever passes by morning. Somehow, miraculously, she does not sweat. Her colour returns. She eats. You let out a breath you've been holding for days. Maybe it was just the cold. Maybe it was something worse and she beat it. You don't know. You don't need to know. All that matters is that she lives. You take the dried lavender from beneath her pillow and press it to your face. It smells like earth, like hope. You do not throw it away. Elsewhere in the city there is change, small, subtle, but real. Some people begin to emerge, not many, and always cautiously, but they step into the light again. A baker reopens his stall, though he sells only hard rolls and charges twice the usual price. A washerwoman strings her linens outside for the first time in weeks, and neighbours whisper that she must be brave or foolish. Someone restarts the forge, and the clang of metal on metal echoes down the lane like a heartbeat. Even the city council stirs to action. Notices are nailed to posts written in firm, curling script. Public gatherings forbidden, sick houses to be reported, streets to be swept twice weekly. There's a reward for information about healers offering false cures, and a punishment for anyone caught burning infected clothes in the common green. They're trying, at least, trying to impose order on something shapeless and wild. But you know rules won't save anyone. People obey when they can, bend the rules when they must, and break them when desperation takes over. A man whose wife fell ill last week was seen dragging her bed into the alley, insisting she would heal better in fresh air. She died by morning. He hasn't spoken since. Another woman sold her wedding ring for a jar of honey and thyme, told the seller her husband would live if he tasted it before midnight. He didn't. The seller is gone, vanished into the mist of the next street over. Some choose to leave the city entirely. You hear stories of travellers who brave the muddy roads, bandits and cold to reach distant relatives. A few make it. A few disappear. One family near the bridge packed a cart with everything they owned and vanished into the dawn. Days later, the cart was found empty on the roadside, its wheels still spinning. No sign of them remained. In the countryside, villagers watch the road with wary eyes. Travellers are turned away, sometimes kindly, sometimes with stones. A farmer posts a sign: no room, no bread, no mercy. You can't blame him. His family fell ill after sheltering a sick man from the city. 3 are dead now. The sign is his grief, etched in wood. Back in London, the river continues its slow, brown journey through the heart of the city, carrying away the waste, the dead, the prayers people toss in folded notes sealed with wax. The bargemen still work, ferrying goods and people across the murky waters, faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats and soaked scarves. They say the river listens, that if you whisper your wish to it before dawn, it might carry it far enough for the saints to hear. One woman, old, eyes milky with age, claimed she spoke to the river and it answered. Soon, it told her, the sweat will leave. Whether she's mad or merely hopeful is anyone's guess. But her story spreads. People begin leaving candles by the water, floating paper boats with tiny messages. Some pray, others laugh. But the river pays no mind. At night, the fog creeps in like a second skin. You sit by the fire, watching its glow flicker across the walls. Your sister sleeps beside you, curled under a quilt made by your mother before she passed. The silence is deep but not empty. You hear your neighbours moving. Someone coughing, someone crying softly, someone whispering what sounds like a lullaby. You think of the boy singing in the square, of the red mark on the apothecary's door, of the way the sickness came, fast and sharp, and how now it lingers like a question no one can answer. Historians still study this strange plague, their theories piling up like fallen leaves. Was it a rodent-borne virus, like hantavirus, a form of pulmonary influenza? Was it bacterial, viral, or something else entirely? A disease that burned so hot and so fast it vanished before it could be studied. Some suggest it came with soldiers, others with rats, others still that it rose from the very filth of the streets, a punishment born from neglect. The truth remains just out of reach, like a face glimpsed in the fog. But here, now, the facts matter less than the living. You are one of them. You have survived, so far, and you begin to wonder what the city will look like when this is over. Will people forget? Will they dance in the streets when the last case fades? Or will they retreat deeper into themselves, carrying the weight of this season for the rest of their lives? As the fire dies down, you breathe deeply. Outside, the fog begins to thin. You can almost see stars overhead. Not many, but a few. Tiny, cold, and distant. They blink down at you as if surprised to find you still awake. You do not wave at them or speak. You just watch, quietly, gratefully. The following morning comes with no announcement, no drum roll, no shift in the clouds, but somehow the air feels heavier, not with rain or sickness, but with weariness, a different sort of weight, the weight of living through something that refuses to end. You rise from your bed slowly, as though your bones have aged years overnight. The fire has gone out and the chill of dawn creeps along the floorboards. Your sister stirs beside you, her brow dry, her breath even. She made it through another night. You murmur a silent thanks, not to anyone in particular, but to the space between breaths that still keeps you both alive. Stepping outside, you find that the street is quieter than usual, even for these days. No one is arguing at the baker's window. No horses clop past dragging carts of grain. It's not silence. It's the sound of a city exhausted. Everyone has learned to move softly, to speak only when necessary, to preserve energy for whatever new grief may come before nightfall. Down the lane, someone has hung a string of bright ribbons from a windowsill. Red, gold, green and blue. No message, no note. Just colour, fluttering defiantly in the breeze. You stop and stare at them longer than you expect. They mean nothing, perhaps. Or perhaps they mean everything. A sign that life still exists, that beauty still matters, even if only for a moment. By the afternoon, you notice other windows adorned with similar offerings, old scraps of fabric, coloured wax seals, even flower petals glued with honey to stone. Small gestures, quiet rebellions. You make your way to the well, taking care not to let your hands linger on the handle. The rope creaks as the bucket descends. A neighbour, Mr. Barrow, you think, approaches from the opposite side. You haven't spoken in days, but you nod to one another. That's all that's needed. No small talk, no platitudes. Just two people acknowledging that they are still here. He looks thinner. You imagine you do too. The water sloshes into your jug, and you wrap the handle with a cloth to carry it home. On the walk back, you pass a midwife's house. A sign is posted on the door in crooked letters, willing to deliver, no charge. You pause. Beneath it, someone has written, "God bless you" in charcoal. Below that, a child's drawing, a stick figure family holding hands beneath a large sun. The drawing is smudged by weather, but the meaning remains clear. Inside, your mother's old recipe book lies open on the table. Not for food, there's little enough of that, but for a tonic made with elderflower and clove. For the nerves, she'd written in her neat looping script. You try it, even though the ingredients are nearly impossible to come by. You manage to find dried elderberries and a pinch of clove bought from a silent old man who charged you 3 times its worth. You boil them in water and strain the brew into 2 cracked mugs. When your sister drinks hers, she smiles. It tastes awful, but it's something. That's what everyone is learning, how to live with something in place of everything. In the next parish over, you hear news of a scholar who has begun to write a book about the sweat. Not a treatise or medical report, but a kind of diary, a record of what people did, what they believed, what they feared. He collects stories and songs, draws sketches of talismans and interviews survivors. Some say he's gone mad. Others say he's doing God's work, trying to preserve what little truth might survive this strange, unwelcome chapter of history. You wonder if anyone will read his book one day, or if it will be forgotten like so many others, mouldering in a dusty chest, its pages warped by damp. Elsewhere, a group of musicians has begun gathering again. Just 2 fiddles and a drum, but their sound travels. They play not in the square, but from behind shuttered windows and up on rooftops. When their music begins, heads appear in windows, shoulders lift slightly, toes tap softly on stone floors. The songs are old ones, hymns, folk dances, lullabies, but they offer a rhythm to the days again. And in a time of chaos, rhythm feels like salvation. You notice how people have grown quieter. Yes, but not cold. In fact, there's a strange warmth under the surface of this collective hush. A woman leaves a handful of dried apples at the door of a house where 3 children live alone. A man wraps a loaf in cloth and slips it onto the steps of a sick neighbour. A young girl delivers kindling to a widow whose hearth went dark. No one boasts. No one calls attention. These acts of kindness appear and vanish like ghosts, silent and sacred. One morning, the sound of church bells returns. Not the slow toll of funerals, but a rapid peal of celebration. A child has survived. The family, poor as they are, has rung the bell themselves. It's not an official service. The priest doesn't appear, but the sound echoes through the neighbourhood and people stop what they're doing to listen. A small cheer rises. Hands clap. The applause is brief, but real. The child, 7, maybe 8, is seen later that day, wrapped in a wool shawl, sipping broth outside the door. Her eyes are tired, but she smiles. Still, the sickness hasn't gone. Not entirely. You pass 2 men digging a shallow grave in the field beyond the wall. They do not speak. One of them has tears on his face. A cart stands nearby, covered by a sheet. You do not ask how many it holds. In the city's heart, the healers continue their work. Some are honest, devoted to easing suffering. Others are opportunists, preying on the desperate. You hear of one who claims to have found the perfect cure, a mixture of ground pearl, wine, and goose blood. It's expensive, of course. You do not try it. Others do. Most of them still die. Another healer, known only as Mother Elspeth, works from a small shed near the river. She takes no money and sees only one patient at a time. Her remedies are simple: herbs, steam, prayer. Some call her a witch, others a saint. People line up before dawn, braving the cold, just for a chance to speak with her. Some return home unchanged. Others seem better. No one knows why. But the line continues to grow. Historians still argue about people like Elspeth. Were they frauds? Was healing possible at all? Or were the survivors simply the lucky ones? Did faith and care truly help? Or were they no more effective than the vinegar-soaked scarves people wore to bed? The records are unclear, but even the most sceptical chroniclers admit that those who believed they might be healed often seemed to survive more often than those who did not. The mind, after all, is a powerful thing. One evening, as the sun dips below the skyline in streaks of copper and bruised purple, you gather with your sister by the hearth. The stew is thin, but it's warm. She hums a tune as she stirs. You recognise it. It's one the fiddlers played last week, a lullaby. You close your eyes for a moment, allowing yourself to feel something dangerously close to peace. Then the knock comes. A soft, hesitant knock at the door. Your heart skips. You haven't had a visitor in weeks, not since the sickness came to your street. You exchange a glance with your sister. She moves behind you as you approach the door. You crack it open. Outside stands a young man, barely 20, soaked from the rain, holding something wrapped in cloth. He's panting, clearly frightened. "Please," he says. "I'm not sick. But my sister, she has the sweat. I don't know where else to go." You pause. Every instinct tells you to close the door, but then you see the desperation in his eyes, the way his hands shake. He's brought nothing but the cloth, her blanket maybe, or a favour to bury with her. You step outside and give him your last bundle of thyme and elderflower. "Brew this," you tell him. "Keep her warm. Don't let her be alone." He nods. Tears well. "Thank you," he says. "You're the first person who's opened a door in 2 days." He disappears into the dusk. You return to the fire, wrap your sister in another blanket, and sit close. You don't talk about the knock. You don't have to. In this world, opening a door is no small thing. Later, as you drift towards sleep, the wind picks up. It rattles the shutters and hums through the cracks in the wall. But the fire holds. Your sister breathes evenly beside you, and for tonight that's enough. The days continue, slow, grey, and thick with repetition. But repetition, you find, is its own kind of mercy. You wake, you check for signs of sweat or fever. You draw water, you boil broth, you sweep the hearth, you keep going. Because to stop would be to notice what has been lost, and there is too much of that already. The sickness, though it no longer burns through the city with the speed of fire, still smoulders in the corners. It waits in quiet households, in the backs of forgotten lanes. Each week, a few more names are spoken in low voices, another handful of burials under slate-coloured skies. But the worst, people say, might be over. You don't know if that's true, but you do know this. The city has changed. You have changed. People nod more slowly to one another. Their eyes linger a bit longer. When they speak, they use fewer words, as if each syllable carries weight. A simple, "You all right?" has become a sacred thing. You watch your sister as she carefully peels a turnip. Her fingers are thin but no longer trembling. Her colour has returned. When she smiles at you over the pot, your throat tightens. You remember the way she looked in those fevered nights, cheeks flushed, eyes glazed, limbs limp in your arms. The memory lives just beneath the skin, and you don't speak of it. Neither does she. But the quiet between you is full of understanding. One afternoon you pass the town scribe's door and see that he has reopened. A chalkboard outside reads, "Letters written, messages delivered." Beneath it someone has added, "Love costs nothing." A girl with braided hair sits on the stoop with a small sheaf of parchment, practicing the curves of her letters. You hear her whisper the names of people she misses. The scribe gives her a penny and an apple when she finishes. Across the street, an elderly man carves tiny figurines from scraps of wood. He used to be a cooper, someone says. No one needs barrels now, but children come to his step and choose a little bird, a dog, a saint. He never asks for payment. One mother leaves him a heel of rye bread each morning wrapped in linen. The churches have reopened, not fully but enough. Small services are held outdoors, spaced and quiet. No singing, but there are candles and murmured prayers. You stand near the back, your sister's hand in yours, and feel something pull at your chest. Not relief, not yet, but something like it. The priest, his voice worn from weeks of weeping over graves, simply says, "You have lived." That is a kind of testimony. You think of all those who didn't. Whole families gone. Apprenticeships ended mid-task. Love letters undelivered. Songs unsung. The city feels full of ghosts. Some are known to you. Neighbours whose shoes still sit by their doorsteps. Friends whose laughter echoes in memory. Others are strangers, marked only by the silence they left behind. Their absence hums in the bricks. In a moment of stillness, you return to the graveyard near the edge of town. The grass has begun to grow again. The graves are marked in many ways, some with carved stones, others with bundles of flowers or tokens, a broken comb, a ribbon, a lock of hair. The wind carries with it the smell of soil and wood smoke. You kneel at one unmarked grave and lay down a small bundle of time. No name, no need. The gesture is enough. Historians still argue whether the people of Tudor England understood grief the way we do now. Their faith in heaven, they say, made death more bearable, that they were used to loss, that plague and war and famine had dulled them. But you know better. You've seen how a mother cradles her sick child's empty blanket, how a boy presses his forehead to the closed chapel door. Grief does not change across centuries. It only wears different clothes. In the city, trade is slowly resuming. The boats return to the docks with crates of grain, cloth and salt. At the market, you hear the first real laugh in weeks. A woman teasing her husband for overpaying on onions. The butcher's son, who had gone silent during the worst weeks, now calls out his prices again, though not as loudly as before. The sound of commerce is tentative, like a song beginning after a long silence. You pass a tavern and notice that its shutters are open. The air inside smells of yeast and wood polish. A group of men sit distanced at separate tables, sipping ale in silence. There is no singing, no dice games, no raised mugs, but they are there, and that means something. You spot the fiddlers again, now 3 of them. They've taken to setting up by the fountain in the main square, playing during the noon hour when the sun is highest. Their music is still careful, more hymn than dance, but you see a young couple swaying at a distance, eyes closed, hands barely touching. The scholar who began recording stories has grown thin and pale. His eyes have the look of someone who's seen too much, but still, he writes. Each day, he visits a different household, listening. He gathers tales, what people did when they felt the first signs, how they prayed, who they lost, what they dreamed during fever. His book, he says, is not about death. It's about what people chose to do while they waited. You think about that, about how many choices are made in the middle of fear. Some are brave, some are desperate, some are both. You remember offering herbs to that stranger at your door, your own heart pounding, unsure whether it was foolish or kind, and you realise the answer doesn't matter. You did it. That's what remains. At home, your sister takes up your mother's old spindle and begins to spin thread again. Her hands fumble at first, but muscle memory is stronger than grief. You bring in reeds to weave baskets, just as your father once did. You sit together in the evenings now, not in silence, but in rhythm. The low whir of the spindle, the creak of willow, the crackle of the hearth. Not all conversation must be spoken. One night the city holds a vigil, not organised, not planned. It begins with one family placing a candle in their window at dusk, then another, then another. Soon the streets are lit with soft flickers. You step outside and light yours. You see your neighbours do the same. No one speaks. But in that shared light, you feel the shape of something too large to name. Later, some say it was the day the sickness truly began to fade. Others say it was only hope that flared that night, not health. But either way, people remember it. They call it the Night of Quiet Flame. The records from this time are sparse. Paper was precious, and most were too weary to write. But a few pages survive. Diaries, letters, fragments of sermons. They speak not only of the illness, but of the strange soft after, the way people tiptoed back into life, how they treated one another more gently, how they remembered to ask, "Are you truly well?" and meant it. Historians still argue whether the sweating sickness was truly over by then. There would be more outbreaks in the years to come, 1517, 1528, 1551. It would vanish just as suddenly as it came, but for now, in this moment, in your street, the worst is behind you. You know this because your sister sings again. Not loudly, not in public, but while she works. Half melodies, old tunes, nothing special. But music, once lost, is a sign of healing. You hum along. Your voice cracks, but she grins and doesn't stop. You begin to plan, not far ahead, just enough. You plant a pot of rosemary, you trade an old shawl for a spool of thread, you clean your father's tools. These are the things that will build the days ahead. Not joy, perhaps, not yet, but continuity, and that too is sacred. As the sun sets, you sit on the stoop, arms around your knees, and watch the sky turn lavender. The world is quieter than before, but not empty. Somewhere nearby, a door creaks open. A broom sweeps. A baby cries. Life. Resumed. You don't know what comes next. But for now, you have breath in your lungs. A home with a roof. A sister who sleeps peacefully. And in a world that once shook with fever, that is enough. You begin to notice that time has shifted. Not in the way the seasons shift, slow and golden and inevitable, but in how memory settles into the walls of your house. The floorboards creak the same way they always have, but now it sounds different, like footsteps from a world before the sweat. You don't mark time by dates anymore. There is before, and there is after. Before the sickness, when the streets rang with laughter, and the church bells meant weddings or births. After, when silence became the city's language, and every sound was measured against the silence that might follow. Yet now, in this strange quiet, you find yourself paying closer attention to what remains. The way your sister combs her hair slowly in the mornings, no longer hurried or afraid. The exact pattern of light that spills through the shutters when the sun reaches the third notch in the roof beam. The odd crooked smile of your neighbour as he tends a plant that somehow survived both frost and grief. You've stopped asking when it will end. The question itself feels like a relic, something that belonged to the early days. when hope meant return, not change. Because you know, now, that things will not return. They will grow again, but differently. Nothing will be untouched. And perhaps that's the most terrifying part of all, not the dying, but the living after. There's a new sound in the city now. Hammers, saws, the clatter of scaffolding. Some buildings had fallen into disrepair during the worst of it. Roofs collapsed, shutters were stolen for firewood, doors broke under the weight of too many people trying to get out at once. Now slowly they are being repaired. Not by builders alone, but by neighbours, helping neighbours. You lend your hands where you can, though the work is slow and splintered. One nail at a time, one brick. The school reopens. It's a modest affair. Only a dozen students, seated far apart, many of them still wearing sprigs of lavender pinned to their sleeves. The teacher, Mr. Cartwright, has returned from the country where he fled during the worst outbreak. His beard is longer now. His voice is softer. He reads aloud from psalms and ancient tales, letting the rhythm of language fill the gaps where understanding falters. You see the children blink, their eyes wide and tired, but they listen. And that is the beginning of learning again. One girl raises her hand during a reading of the tale of King Arthur. "Why didn't the sickness ever come to Camelot?" she asks. Mr. Cartwright pauses. "Maybe it did," he says gently, "but maybe they chose to tell other parts of the story." That night you dream of Camelot. Not the one in the stories, but your own. A market street where the stalls were always full, where the cobblers gossiped, where your mother scolded you gently for tracking mud inside. You wake before the dream ends, and it takes a moment to remember where you are. The dream is bittersweet, like a song half forgotten. You walk to the edge of town one morning and find the gates have reopened. The guard posts are still manned, but they no longer bar passage. Merchants return, warily. A cart of vegetables from a nearby village, a crate of candles, some lengths of linen. These are signs, not only of trade, but of trust. The world is letting London back in. Beyond the gates you visit a place you haven't seen in months. The garden your father once tended. It's overgrown now, wild and choked with weeds. But beneath the tangle there are signs of life. A few stubborn cabbages, some sprigs of mint sharp and insistent. You kneel and begin to clear the overgrowth. You work slowly, gently, with reverence. Other families begin to do the same. Old plots are uncovered, seeds are shared. People begin to talk about what to plant in spring. You trade half a loaf for a packet of carrot seed, not because you particularly like carrots, but because they feel solid, reliable, a root that grows quietly underground, patient and unseen. Still, not everything heals. Some people cannot bear to speak of what happened. Others speak of nothing else. A woman down your street has taken to lighting 3 candles every night at her window, one for each child she lost. A man once known for his laugh now moves as if underwater, eyes always scanning the horizon. The blacksmith stopped working completely, claiming that the sound of hammer on anvil reminds him too much of coffin nails. You understand, there is no correct shape for grief. You hear that in some parts of the countryside the sickness never came. Whole villages escaped untouched. When the people from those places venture into the city now, they look around with a kind of awe and pity, as if they're walking through a myth, uncertain whether they believe it. Some city folk resent them for it, others envy them. Historians still debate why the sweating sickness affected regions so unevenly. Some say it followed trade routes, others blame climate or soil, a few claim divine intervention, protection or punishment. But none of the theories hold for long. The sickness moved like wind, invisible, unpredictable, merciless. You return to the graveyard more often now. It has become a kind of second home, a place of ritual. Not to mourn alone, but to remember together. People come and go quietly, tending graves, reading names aloud, leaving behind tokens, rosemary, notes, scraps of cloth. A priest has painted a bench and placed it beneath the yew tree. On it someone has carved, "We remember not to ache, but to keep." One day your sister brings a sketch she made, A drawing of your family before. She's only 10, but the faces are recognisable. Your mother's long braid, your father's smile. A cat long since vanished. She sets it on the grave and says, "Now they can see we didn't forget." You don't cry. You just take her hand and sit beside her in the grass. Later that week, you meet a traveller who says the sickness is burning in another city now, far away near the coast. He doesn't know how many have died. He says they are trying the same herbs you did, the same prayers, the same tears. You give him what you can, a bundle of dried sage and a warning to burn vinegar in the air. Whether it helps or not, it feels like passing on a torch in a world that keeps losing light. Back in London, the air is changing. Not just the weather, though. Spring presses in. Buds on branches, softer wind, the scent of rain that no longer smells like endings. No, the change is in the people. Their eyes lift more often now. Conversations last a little longer. You even hear a song played in a tavern, a fast one, a dancing one. No one dances, but they listen. The city remains marked. Its walls are etched with sorrow, but also with survival. You visit the scribe again and commission a letter. It's addressed to no one in particular, just a note to the future. We lived through fire. We remembered to plant. We remembered to sing. You visit the scribe again and commission a letter. It's addressed to no one in particular, just a note to the future. We lived through fire. We remembered to plant. We remembered to sing. The scribe nods as he writes it. That's what they'll need to know, he says. That night your sister asks if she can open the window while she sleeps. You hesitate, then you nod. She's right. The world outside is no longer an enemy, at least not always. You lie awake beside her, listening to the city breathe. It is still healing, but it is breathing. Somewhere in the distance a bell rings, not a funeral, just the hour. You close your eyes, and the world continues. The morning greets you with warmth, not from the hearth, ashes sit cold in the grate, but from the sun itself, casting a pale golden light over the buildings like a blanket laid softly across the city's shoulders. You pause at the doorway to your home and take it in, this light, this stillness. For months, every new day had carried a threat, an invisible danger draped over the city like fog. But now, for the first time in memory, dawn feels less like a challenge and more like a question. A gentle one. What now? You step outside and take in the sounds of the street. They are still subdued, like someone humming from another room, but they are there. A merchant cart rattles over cobblestones, the creak of the wheels no longer sharp and jarring, but rhythmic, purposeful. Two women speak softly as they carry baskets toward the market. You hear the faint clang of hammer to metal. The smith has returned to his forge. In the early days of the sweating sickness, doors had shut and windows had dimmed. People had vanished into their homes like ghosts hiding from the judgment of the sky. Now shutters are open. You catch glimpses of people inside, cleaning, cooking, reading aloud. One man is combing his hair in a mirror. It feels intimate, even holy, to witness these small acts of return. Your sister joins you, lacing her boots with careful hands. She no longer hesitates to touch the door latch or step beyond the threshold. You remember how she once asked whether death could slip under the sill like cold air, and now she moves without fear. Not because it is gone, but because she knows it and walks beside it, unafraid. The market is busier than it's been in months. Not crowded, no one has forgotten the danger, but full enough to buzz. You pass a stall selling barley flour, another with wilted greens, and yet another with pins and thread. The merchant offers a quiet smile and says, "Still standing, are we?" It is not a question, it's a salute. A child weaves through the crowd with a basket of apples, smaller this season, more bruised, but apples nonetheless. People stop him gently, press coins into his hand, take fruit with reverence. You buy one, polish it on your sleeve and take a bite. It's tart and sharp and alive. As you walk through the stalls, you notice more than goods being exchanged. People are trading stories too. Small confessions, murmured updates, fragments of laughter that catch the breeze and linger in the air. "She made it through," one woman says, eyes wide with relief. "We buried 3, but the babe lived," another murmurs. "My brother swore by foxglove and vinegar baths, daft as he is." And you find yourself telling your own stories too, of how you learned to brew broth with wild garlic, how your sister sang lullabies even during her fever, how you opened the door to a stranger and did not regret it. These are not boastful tales, they are offerings, proof that you are still here. Yet the sickness has not disappeared entirely. People still speak of new cases, but they are fewer now and slower to appear. 1 or 2 each week, not dozens. Sometimes they recover. Sometimes they do not. No one is naive enough to believe it's truly gone, but its grip has loosened. Its shadow lingers, but it no longer covers everything. Quarantine is still practiced. If someone falls ill, they are tended to cautiously. A red ribbon is tied on the door and food is left on the step. Neighbours speak with them through shutters or from across the street. A physician, more confident now, more prepared, might visit and stay longer than before. There are now records kept of every case. Patterns are studied, remedies tested. You hear that a university doctor is writing a paper about it, though no one can agree on the cause. Historians still argue whether the disease was viral, environmental, or something stranger. Some say it was a strain of hantavirus, spread through rodents. Others claim it came from bad air, the infamous miasma, rising from refuse and open sewers. A few whisper darker theories, a punishment, a poison, an alchemy of sins. Even now, centuries later, the debate continues. But in your time, it doesn't matter what the cause is, not yet. What matters is how to live with its memory. At the edge of the market square, a cart has been set up not for selling but for sharing. A sign reads, "Take what you need, leave what you can." You see a man drop off a pair of wool gloves and take a crust of bread. A child trades a handful of dried plums for a book. These exchanges are quiet, tender, built on trust. No one oversees it. No one polices it. It works because it must. In the afternoons, you help with repairs in the West Quarter, where the alleyways are tight and the roofs lean close to one another like conspirators. One family lost their entire upper floor to fire during the worst night of panic. The flame had caught on oilcloth left too close to the hearth. You climb the scaffolding, pass up beams and nails, hold the ladder as the mason climbs. No one speaks much. But when the roof goes on, a cheer goes up, not loud but bright. The children return to play in the alleyways. Their games have changed. One you see involves tying a red ribbon to the arm and pretending to heal each other. Another is a chase game where the sweater tries to tag the healer before being cured. Some adults frown, uneasy at the mimicry, but others let it pass. The children have found a way to understand their world through play. Let them have it. Your sister begins drawing again. First, she sketches the garden you both cleared, then the market, the new roof, the bench in the graveyard. She even draws the cart of shared goods, and the fiddlers who still play once a week. One evening she shows you a picture of your street, every house with smoke rising from the chimneys. "It means they're alive," she explains. You take it and pin it to the wall. News arrives that the sickness has begun to fade elsewhere as well. A letter from a town near Canterbury says their cases have dropped to none. Another from a merchant in Bristol says people are dancing again. Carefully, yes, but dancing. You read these messages aloud, and for once people don't scoff or shake their heads. They listen, they believe. A public gathering is held in the square, the first in months. Not a celebration exactly, but a remembrance. People come with flowers, songs, prayers. Names are read aloud, dozens of them. Some are accompanied by tears, others by silence, some by laughter as memories surface. You light a candle and whisper 3 names. As the wind lifts the flames, you see your neighbours doing the same. No one says, "We are finished with this," but they do say, "We remember," and that is a kind of triumph. The seasons change. Spring gives way to summer, the days grow longer, the city breathes in full again. You help plant new herbs in the garden: basil, mint, rosemary. You keep some for cooking, some for medicine, some just because they smell like hope. Your sister sketches the garden as it grows. The birds return. So do the bees. Some people leave. Travellers set out for distant towns, hoping to reconnect with those lost to distance rather than death. Others arrive. Widows seeking work, children sent to live with relatives, tradesmen hoping for fresh customers. The city's rhythm changes again, growing louder. But still you keep to certain habits. You tie a lavender sprig to your wrist each morning. You leave a crust of bread at the garden wall just in case. You open the window before sleep. You walk slowly, noticing everything: the colour of dawn, the pattern of leaves, the sound of a bell ringing far away. Because you know what it is to miss these things. And now, you never take them for granted. You do not forget. You never will. But you continue, and so does the city. The summer deepens, and with it comes a thick, humming heat that clings to your skin and settles into the stone of every building. The streets are busier now, but even the noise has changed. Laughter returns, not the carefree kind that once echoed through alleyways before the sickness, but something lower, gentler, shaded by memory. You begin to realise that survival has softened the city, like river water slowly shaping stone. The people who are left have become more deliberate in everything they do. You rise earlier now, partly out of habit, partly because the cool air before sunrise is the only time you truly feel at ease. The city's rooftops shimmer with dew. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys. Your sister sleeps peacefully, limbs tangled in linen, her breath steady. You pull the shutters open and let the day come in, no longer fearing what it might bring. Everywhere, the signs of reconstruction multiply. Stonemasons repair broken steps. Glaziers reset windows shattered in panic. Tailors stitch together garments that had been abandoned when their owners vanished. A new rhythm pulses beneath the surface of things. Not the rushed pace of the city before the sweat, but something slower, more thoughtful, as though everyone is learning how to live again, on unfamiliar terms. You help rebuild the church fence one morning. It's a warm day, and your shirt sticks to your back as you dig out rotted posts. The others work in silence for hours. Only when the final beam is nailed into place does someone speak. "That fence kept nothing out," says an older man, wiping his brow. "But maybe it'll keep something in now." You don't ask what he means. You know. The fence isn't for safety. It's for memory. A boundary between what came before and what remains. Later that week, your sister suggests holding a small feast, not to celebrate survival, but to remember those who didn't. You invite neighbours, keep the gathering small, careful. Everyone brings something: a pot of lentils, a loaf of crusty bread, a dish of berries, a jug of cider. You eat together in the garden. No speeches, no ceremony. Just shared food, shared silence, shared stories. One man brings a song. He sings softly, unaccompanied, a tune about waiting through winter and watching for spring. When he finishes, no one claps, but the air feels lighter, as if the song has cleared away something heavy. After the meal, you and your sister sit on the steps, watching fireflies dance near the herb patch. "Do you think it's really over?" she asks. You think for a long time before answering. "I think it's different now," you say. "Not over, but changed." She nods. That's enough. A week later, the letter comes. It's sealed in blue wax, the symbol of the King's Council pressed into the centre. Inside, an announcement. A formal declaration that the outbreak has officially ended. The worst has passed. The city may reopen fully. Guilds may return to work. Trade may resume. There is no cheering in the street, no flood of celebration. The declaration, though important, comes long after people had already begun to heal. Instead, there's a quiet kind of release. A loosening of breath that had been held for far too long. Some people cry, others laugh. Most simply go on with their day, one foot after another. But for the first time in months, the church bells ring a full chime. Not for death, not for mourning, but for announcement. They echo across the rooftops, through the markets and the alleyways into every home. You pause and listen. You let the sound settle in your chest. News spreads quickly. That evening the square is fuller than it's been in nearly a year. Street musicians play again. Not just hymns now, but quick, joyful tunes that make children spin and skip. Bakers give away crusts to those who pass. People light candles not for remembrance but for celebration. You light one too. You don't join the dancing, but you stay. You listen. In the following days, life floods back into the city with a cautious vibrancy. Schools resume regular lessons. Merchants roll out colourful cloths, tins of spice, bowls of fruit. Travellers return with tales from villages where the sickness never reached. Others come bearing letters from those who fled and now wish to come home. You watch it all with quiet amazement, not because it's happening, but because it's happening gently. No one rushes. No one demands a return to what once was. Everyone knows it isn't possible. And still, there are reminders. At the city's edge, a monument is being built. Simple, stone, circular. No statues, no grand inscriptions. Just names carved into the inside of the wall. Hundreds of names. More being added every day. Families come and place their hands on the letters. Some cry, some whisper, some just sit in silence. Your sister etches your parents' names into the ledger kept by the monument builders. She asks you how to spell them. You tell her slowly, carefully, and she presses hard with the quill, as if carving them into the paper with intention. "Do you think they'd be proud of us?" she asks that night. "I think they already were," you answer, "even before." She places their drawing, her drawing, at the base of the monument the next day, and you realise grief has become part of your every action, not heavy or sharp, but embedded, woven in. It sits beside love and memory, not in competition with them, but as an equal. Some visitors ask why there are no grand processions or feasts to mark the sickness's end. "We mourned loudly," one woman tells them. "We return quietly." One morning you receive word of a cousin from a nearby town who has finally recovered after falling ill during one of the final waves. He writes of fevers and confusion, but also of strange dreams, of people he's never met, places he's never seen, all lit in soft candlelight. You wonder if everyone who came close to death dreamt the same. Your sister begins writing, recording the stories she's heard. At first it's just memories, snippets from neighbours, overheard tales at the well. But over time, she weaves them together like patchwork into something larger, a kind of collective memory, a story that belongs to everyone. Not a history, she says, a remembering. She reads a passage to you one evening. The sickness did not care for name or station, but those who remained learned the shape of silence, and from that silence they began to speak differently. They whispered to the walls, and the walls whispered back, and the city, though altered, began to hum again. You tell her it's beautiful. She tells you it's true. The monument is finished in early autumn. You go with your sister to see it again. The air is crisp, leaves crackling underfoot. You place a sprig of rosemary on the steps. A stranger offers you a cup of cider. You take it and raise it slightly, a quiet toast. He nods. No words are exchanged. They aren't needed. As you leave, you see someone new arriving. Young, dressed for travel, carrying a pack of belongings and looking lost. You guide him to the market, show him where the shared cart is, where to sleep if he has no home. You don't ask why he came or what he lost, you just help. And later that night, as the last of the embers die in the hearth, you think about how things might grow again. Not rebuild, not repeat, but grow. Like shoots after a fire, twisted, yes, but green. Because this, you've learned, is what survival means. Not merely breathing, but choosing to make meaning of breath. Choosing to remember. Choosing to stay open, even when the world closes in. And so you choose again, every day. You open your shutters, you walk the city, you greet your neighbours, you write your own remembering. Because even now, in the space where fear once lived, there is room for a different kind of fire. A fire that warms, that rebuilds, that continues. The wind changes. There is no thunderclap, no herald from the sky. but you feel it in your bones as surely as if someone whispered in your ear, "It's time to begin again." You wake one morning and find the air crisper, the light clearer. The heat of summer has mellowed into the amber tones of early autumn. Leaves curl and fall without the force of storms or winds, just the natural turning of the season. But you recognise this shift for what it is. Not just weather, but life resuming its slow, stubborn march forward. You walk through the city with your sister, the two of you side by side, coats buttoned, scarves pulled tight. There's an edge to the breeze that makes your cheeks glow, and as you pass through the narrow streets, you see that even the city's colours have shifted. Fabrics in shop windows have returned to brightness, deep reds, forest greens, ochres. For so long the clothing was faded, practical, soft with wear. Now it gleams again, as if someone opened a chest of forgotten light and laid it out on display. In the baker's shop, the scent of spice hits you first. Cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves. You haven't smelled these things in nearly a year. The baker grins as he dusts flour off his apron, proudly presenting a tray of spiced buns still steaming. He offers you one without a word. You hesitate before accepting. Not because you're afraid of illness, but because your body has forgotten what it means to taste something made purely for joy. You bite into it slowly. It's sweet and warm and soft, and when your sister tries hers, she makes a face that says, "How did we ever forget this?" But you didn't forget. You just buried it beneath the weight of survival. Other signs appear like small lanterns in the dusk. A tailor hanging dyed ribbons outside her shop. A weaver displaying bolts of cloth the colour of sunflowers and wheat fields. A boy in the square juggling apples. Clumsily, but with laughter. And behind it all, the sound of hammers and saws continues. Not desperate now, but determined. The city is still healing, but its wounds are no longer raw. There is a new kind of procession that has begun to appear. Small groups of people walking together, not in mourning this time, but in reflection. They carry candles in the late afternoon and stop outside homes where lives were lost. At each stop they leave something simple, a bloom of heather, a stone marked with initials, a piece of ribbon. Some call it the thread walk, because they say each person lost is like a thread in the city's great tapestry, and these processions are a way to weave those threads back in, even if only in spirit. You join one on a quiet Wednesday. You don't know all the names called, but you recognise the silence that follows each one. You remember that hush. You walk through it for months. When the group stops outside your own house, you're surprised. Your neighbour steps forward and places a candle on the step. "For the mother," she says softly, not looking at you, "for the father, for the warmth that stayed behind." You feel your sister reach for your hand. You squeeze it tightly. As the group walks on, you stay a moment longer, watching the little flame flicker. Not all moments are sombre. There is laughter too, though it comes in strange bursts. The kind that surprises even the one laughing. It bubbles up in marketplaces when someone makes a joke about onions, or in a classroom when a student draws a crooked picture of a priest with 3 eyes. Laughter is still a little raw, still unsure of itself, but it's there, and festivals return in time, smaller than before and quieter but earnest. The first is the harvest feast, held in the churchyard under strings of lanterns. Tables are laid with whatever can be spared. Bread, porridge, root vegetables, apples, no meat, no extravagance. But there are songs and a few awkward dances. You watch as your sister is pulled into a circle of young people, her cheeks glowing, her feet uncertain, her smile wide. For a moment you see her as she was before the sickness, carefree, mischievous, radiant. You don't join the dance, but you watch it like a sacred rite. Later, you speak with a woman who introduces herself as a gatherer of last words. You frown, unsure what she means. "I record what people said before they died," she explains, "or what the living wish they'd said. Sometimes they write it themselves, sometimes they tell me. I keep them in a book, for the record." She shows you a small ledger, pages filled with sentences, names, dates. Some are long, some are just a word or two. Don't forget the garden. I'm not afraid anymore. Tell Henry I forgave him. You read them in silence, she says. Would you like to add something? You don't answer right away. You walk with the question for days. Eventually you return and write, You kept us warm. She nods without asking who it's for. In the colder months, the sickness is spoken of more like weather, something that happened, not every day, not to everyone, but as part of the season. Children ask questions that make adults flinch. What did the sweat feel like? Why did it take some and not others? Will it come again? There are no answers, only stories. You hear one story of a man who survived but now walks in silence, building small towers out of stones beside the river. Another of a girl who sang her brother's name into a bottle and sent it floating out to sea. Another of a woman who claimed she could taste death in the air, sharp, metallic, like rust on a coin. These stories pass through the city like wind through the trees. You don't try to stop them. They belong to everyone. One day, a scholar visits your home. Not the same one as before. This one is younger, eager, with ink-stained sleeves and a voice full of questions. I'm writing about the plague, he says. The sweat, they're calling it now. I want to understand what it felt like. Not the symptoms, the experience, the living, the losing. He opens a book and gestures for you to speak. And you do. Slowly at first, then faster, spilling memories you didn't know still lived in your chest. He writes without interrupting. Your sister joins in, drawing pictures beside the text. A bowl of herbs, a candle in a window, a face in the fog. When he leaves, he promises to return. These are the stories that matter, he says, more than numbers. You think he might be right. The graveyard is quieter in winter. The leaves are gone and the yew tree stands bare. But people still come. Some clear snow from the names carved in stone. Others bring bird seed or dried flowers tied in bundles with twine. You visit one morning and find a row of paper cranes left at your mother's grave, their wings soaked with frost. A small note tucked beneath them reads, You were loved by strangers too. You return the next day with a folded crane of your own. The city council meets again, this time not to discuss death tolls or curfews, but the future. They talk of new wells, new drainage, safer housing. A few argue about taxes or building permits, but most speak with purpose, with a strange and sober optimism. No one says the words aloud, but you know. They are planning so this does not happen again. Your sister is invited to read her writings at the church on the last Sunday of the year. She's nervous. You walk with her to the pulpit, stand just behind her as she reads. Her voice shakes at first, then steadies. She reads about your street, your garden, your neighbours. She reads about grief, but also about light. And when she finishes, the silence in the church is full, not of sorrow, but of understanding. Afterwards, someone asks her if she'll keep writing, and she says, I don't think I could stop. You light a candle that night and place it on the windowsill. Your sister does the same. So do your neighbours. A chain of golden glow stretches down the lane, into the next, and the next. The sickness is no longer the first thing people mention, but it's never far. It's in the soup recipes passed down from those who nursed the ill, in the gardens planted with protective herbs, in the stories whispered to children at bedtime, not to scare them, but to remind them of what their people have endured. And when the first crocuses bloom in the corners of the square, someone writes on the church wall, We did not forget, but we still remember how to bloom. And the city, quiet, careful, courageous, blooms again. By the time the earth begins to soften beneath your boots again, there's something new in the air. It isn't just spring, though that's part of it. The thaw comes early this year. Rivulets of meltwater running through the gutters, the river swelling quietly past its banks. But what you feel isn't simply the end of winter, it's something else. A quiet confidence, perhaps. Not pride, certainly not joy, not yet. But assurance. The kind of trust that's built not on luck, but endurance. You walk the same streets you've walked for years. But now they carry a different rhythm, a different scent. It's not the sweat, not anymore. That sour fear has vanished like mist before morning. Now the air smells of soap, of mint, of bread dough rising in clay ovens. Things once scarce, now tentatively, hopefully returned. People still speak of the sickness, but less often now in gasps and sobs, more often in murmurs with a measured weight. He had the fever, yes, but it passed in a night. Her whole house was lost, but she took in the neighbour's boy. They burned the linens and no one else caught it. Even in the marketplace, where once there were only whispers and nods, stories unfold more freely. You pause at a stall for saltfish, and the woman next to you begins to speak, unprompted, casually, as if commenting on the weather. My sister said it came to their village like smoke, she says. Didn't even see it until they couldn't breathe. She shrugs and adds, but it left again, just as quick. You nod. You understand. You've lived through the silence between breath and sweat, the moment when a single shiver changes everything. The woman offers you the last fish from the cart. You take it and hand her a dried apple in return. The exchange is silent, sincere. Around the corner, the school children have begun practicing a play. You catch bits of it as you pass, snippets of rhymed dialogue, cardboard masks painted with crooked faces. They act out not a tragedy, but a tale of survival. A traveller who outruns the plague by singing so loudly it loses interest. Absurd. Charming. The kind of story only children can tell with conviction. You watch them for a while, leaning on the stone wall, arms crossed against your chest. Not far off, their teacher leans with you. He says softly, "They'll remember it differently than we do." And you know he's right, because already your own memories are beginning to sort themselves. Moments once sharp and searing, now softened by time. You still remember your father's last breath, your mother's trembling hands, the heat of your sister's forehead during that long night, but the edges are worn. Now there are more memories to sit beside them. Her sketching by firelight, the herb garden returning to green, the feel of her hand in yours when the first bell rang for peace, not death. The bell rings again now, no longer signalling curfews or emergencies, but announcing the arrival of a visiting troupe. Players from another city dressed in threadbare silks and garish paints. You gather with the others in the square to watch them perform. The crowd is still cautious. Not everyone stands close. Some wear herbs at their necks, and many bring their own stools, setting them apart at just the right distance. But they come. They stay. And when the first laugh ripples through the crowd, hesitant, then loud, then contagious, you feel something unfurl in your chest. The play is a comedy, coarse and clever. It's full of masks and mistaken identities, of tricksters and fools who survive by accident. The kind of story that only works when everyone agrees to believe in it for a little while. You laugh. Your sister laughs. Even the baker, 3 rows ahead, lets out a high, barking guffaw that makes the crowd grin harder. For a few hours there is nothing but laughter and stage dust and sunlight. Afterwards, you help sweep the square. The players stay the night in the church hall, and in exchange they perform a second show the next morning, this time for the children. You serve bread and broth from a shared pot, and someone hands you a ribbon to tie on your sleeve. For surviving, they say. You keep it. Later your sister adds it to a wall beside her drawings. There are more of them now, dozens. Scenes of city life returning. A woman stringing onions to dry, a man mending a roof, children playing dice beside the well. She's also begun sketching the dead. Not portraits, but symbols. A candle here, a pressed flower there. She says it helps. You believe her. Others are remembering too. A man at the edge of town has started building small shrines, one in each district where the sweat hit hardest. Nothing ornate, just a stone with a carved mark surrounded by herbs. People bring offerings, figs, coins, notes folded 3 times and tied with string. No one steals from these shrines. No one desecrates them. They have become sacred by necessity, not decree. You hear of a woman who travels from house to house offering to wash linens, not for payment, but for memory. She sings as she works, low, wordless songs that fill the corners of every room she enters. She tells people, clean cloth is a kind of resurrection. You believe that too. There are debates, of course. The city council argues over whether to open the public baths again, whether to allow music festivals, whether to commemorate the year of the sweat with a statue, or let it fade quietly. Some say remembering invites more pain. Others insist that pain unspoken is pain repeated. You attend one meeting sitting in the back. The room is hot, crowded, alive with tension. A woman stands and says, "We mustn't become experts in forgetting." No one argues, but no one votes on anything either. That evening you write a short message and leave it at the shrine near your street. We're still here. That must count for something. Your sister begins keeping time by stories now. Each day she writes a new one. Not always long. Sometimes just a paragraph. Sometimes just a sentence. But she never misses a day. You begin to notice her quiet joy in the act. Her sitting by the fire, head tilted, mouth pressed thoughtfully, pen moving across the page. You read one aloud. Today, the boy with the copper hair returned the shoes he borrowed last spring. He'd kept them safe. When asked why, he said, "Because someday I knew I'd be walking again." You read another. The girl with the fever lived. Her mother said it was the mint in her tea. Her father said it was the birds that sat on her window and sang. The girl said it was the way her sister never stopped brushing her hair even when she didn't wake. These stories are simple, but they hold the whole city in them. You go back to your father's garden one morning and find that someone has planted sunflowers. Dozens of them. No note, no explanation. You know it wasn't your sister, you didn't do it either, but there they are, rising tall and golden against the fence following the sun. That evening a small boy knocks at your door. You recognize him. His family had fallen sick early on. You feared none had survived. But here he stands, clutching a folded paper. "It's for the remembering book," he says, handing it to your sister. She unfolds it gently. Inside is a single drawing, a crooked house with smoke curling from the chimney. A tree, a face in the window. "He said we should draw what we wanted to keep," the boy explains. You give him a piece of bread and watch him skip back down the lane. As spring deepens into full bloom, the city's shape continues to change. Shops reopen, but differently. More people trade instead of buy. More people share. Families take in orphans, widows become teachers. The line between rich and poor, though still visible, seems thinner, stretched by grief. The monument at the edge of the city grows larger. The names continue to be carved, not alphabetically, not by rank, just in the order they were given. One long line, one shared story. Your sister is asked to speak again, this time not in the church, but at the monument. She reads one of her stories. "In the season of sweat, we learned to braid silence and song. We held hands we could not touch. We spoke names into walls and waited for them to echo. And when the quiet broke, we stepped into the light. Changed, yes, but not erased." A pause, then applause. Not loud, not wild, but enough. As you walk home, you pass a group of teenagers singing by the river. Their voices are rough, untrained, beautiful. You don't know the song, but the chorus sticks. "We are not the ones who burned, we are the ones who carried water." And you realize survival is not just a fact, it's a craft, a discipline, a choice. You keep choosing. Every morning you wake, you open the window, you smell bread, you step outside, and every evening you write. You write not because the past must be preserved, but because the present demands witness. You are here. The city is still breathing. The sweat may return one day, or something else may come, but when it does, it will not find you alone. You have built something here, amid the wreckage, not just safety, but meaning, not just memory, but music, and it will hold. Spring pushes hard against the city as though trying to make up for time lost. Trees bud almost overnight, their branches exploding in green. Flower boxes overflow with lavender and thyme. Sparrows dart between rooftops with the urgency of creatures that have known a long winter. It feels as if nature too has remembered how to breathe. You walk the streets with your sister most mornings now, not because you have somewhere urgent to go, but because walking has become a kind of prayer, a way of saying we are still here. The baker greets you by name again. His hair is longer, streaked with grey that wasn't there before the sweat. He gives you a roll warm from the oven, brushing the flour off the top. You look like someone who's outlived a curse, he says with a wink. You grin, not because it's funny, but because it's true. You pass by the square where the children are playing their plague games again, still pretending to heal each other, still arguing over who gets to catch the fever. But there's a new game now too, one they call Return. It involves a journey across the city collecting things left behind. A doll, a shoe, a ribbon, a candle. The one who gathers the most memories wins. You watch them play it, smiling and a little uneasy. Children always find a way to turn horror into stories. Perhaps it's how they stay sane. You pause in front of the scribe shop. He's added a new sign beneath his usual ones. I record memories. Inside, he's copying out more stories now. Letters, dreams, fragments of conversations. You've given him some of your sister's pages. He doesn't speak as he works, just nods respectfully as you place a new one on the stack. Today's is titled The Smell of the River After Silence. It's only a paragraph long, but it's honest. You walk down to the river later to see if it really does smell different. It does. Cleaner. Brighter, somehow. The heavy rot that once clung to the water is gone. Maybe washed out by rain. Maybe just your imagination. But you stay a while, letting the breeze lift your hair, remembering the days when you couldn't bear to come this close. The days when the barges carried more bodies than goods. The days when the water whispered things you didn't want to hear. Now it's quiet, and that quiet is kind. A woman sits on the bank nearby, spinning yarn. She hums as she works. Not a hymn or a lullaby, but a tune you can't place. Half remembered, like something sung in a dream. A boy naps beside her, his mouth open, one dirty hand still clutching a toy carved from bone. You don't interrupt. In the evening you help repaint the fence around the herb garden behind the chapel. The herbs have taken well to the warmer weather. Rosemary thick and resinous, basil reaching greedily for the sun, chamomile already flowering. You plant new rows of thyme and marjoram. Your sister paints the names of each herb on the wood in bright ink. So people remember what saves them, she says. The garden has become a meeting place of sorts. Quiet, respectful. A woman comes every Thursday to leave dried rose petals at the base of the sage plant. She doesn't speak. A man comes to sit with his back to the fennel, scribbling in a notebook. One child waters the parsley daily, even though it rains often enough to make it unnecessary. You learn not to question these things. Grief grows strange roots. So does love. You hear that a travelling merchant has arrived with books from the continent, pamphlets describing diseases with strange names, theories about humours and vapours and invisible particles that dance in the air. People gather to read the pages aloud in the square. Some laugh, some nod solemnly. One man swears the sickness was caused by the alignment of Saturn and Mars. A priest quietly disagrees. Historians still argue over what sweating sickness really was. Some claim it must have been influenza. Fierce, fast, and gone before it could leave much trace. Others insist it was something closer to hantavirus, perhaps linked to the sudden burst of rats after a wet summer. And then there are those who believe it was something we've never truly seen again, a storm of body and spirit that simply burned itself out. But in your part of the city, no one cares for labels anymore. Not really. The names matter less than the faces. The truth is felt in the absences, in chairs that are never filled again, in the doors that never reopened, in the voices that once sang in the square but no longer echo there. The truth is in the space left behind. Still, people continue to build. One morning you see the mayor walking through the lanes with no guard, no parade, just a roll of parchment in one hand and a bit of chalk in the other. He stops at buildings, some abandoned, some still grieving, and marks them with gentle symbols. A circle, a small star, a line crossed with a dot. He doesn't explain them, but you hear they're part of a census, not of people, but of impact, a map of memory. You walk past your own house later and see a circle, unadorned, drawn neatly above the door. Your sister touches it, and you both stand in silence. You don't need to ask what it means. Another day, the city council opens a box sealed at the height of the outbreak. Inside are messages written by the sick, those who feared they might not live to speak again. They'd been collected by healers, scribes, and priests, and hidden away for safekeeping. The messages are read aloud in the square one at a time. Some are just names, some are apologies, some are wishes for the world to be kinder, to be quieter, to be less afraid. One reads, "If I don't survive, tell my son I was brave, even when I wasn't." That one stays with you. A few nights later you have a dream. In it you're back in the thick of the sickness. The city is covered in fog. People move like shadows. Your sister is missing. You run through empty rooms calling her name. Then you hear singing. A single voice. You follow it. You find her sitting beside the river, her hair lit by candlelight. She says, "It's all right now. We came through." When you wake, there is a candle still burning in your window, and your sister is curled beside it, fast asleep. Some mornings, you begin your day by walking to the monument at the edge of the city. You go not to mourn, but to reflect. It's different now, larger. People have carved new paths around it, placed benches, planted trees. Children climb its outer walls, chasing each other in circles. The names are still there, of course, etched deep and dark, weathered by rain and wind. You trace the ones you know. You mouth them like prayer. You bring a slip of paper, as is tradition now. You write, "We are still remembering." You tie it to the branch of a nearby tree with red thread. So many papers flutter beside it. Dozens. Hundreds. Later, you attend a reading at the library. It is the first time your sister has agreed to speak in public. She holds her stories in her hands like something living, fragile but real. Her voice trembles on the first line, then steadies. She reads of gardens and graves, of soup and silence, of how survival doesn't always mean strength. It sometimes just means being there. The crowd is quiet when she finishes. Then someone begins to hum. It's not a song anyone planned, just a note, then another, then more. A hymn rises, familiar and new, stitched together by memory. You join in softly, the sound of the city remembering itself. That evening, walking home, your sister says, "Do you think we'll ever forget?" You shake your head. "We'll let it rest," you say, "but we won't forget." And as you say it, you pass a doorstep where someone has left a bowl of soup, still warm, covered with a cloth embroidered with thyme leaves. A gift, a memory, a promise. You don't take it, but you leave a piece of bread beside it, because this is how cities heal, not with declarations but with dinners shared, not with statues but with stories, not with forgetting but with remembering gently. You are not the same as you were. The city is not the same, but you are still here, and that too is a kind of miracle. Summer approaches with a slow, steady confidence, like a friend who knows they are welcome again. There are days now when you forget for an hour or two that the sweating sickness ever came at all. Then you'll walk past a shutter that still bears the faint trace of a chalked mark, or find a note tied to a tree, weather-worn and blurred with rain, and you'll remember. But the memory doesn't crush you anymore. It sits alongside everything else, like a stone in your pocket, always there, but not heavy enough to stop you from walking. The rhythm of life becomes something new. Not a return to the old, but a weaving of old and new together. You find work helping a candlemaker who lost his apprentice to the sweat. He's quiet, with hands that tremble slightly when he's tired, but he teaches you everything he knows. How to blend tallow with beeswax, how to dye the wicks with crushed berries, how to scent the wax with rosemary or rosewater. The smell of warm wax fills your clothes, your hair, your hands. It's oddly comforting. You never thought you'd associate light with grief, but now you do. One day he hands you a candle and says, "This one's for your mother." You ask how he knew, and he just nods toward the way you roll the wick between your fingers, the way you always reach for the rose oil first. You take the candle home and light it at dusk. The flame is small, steady, golden. Your sister sits beside you, sketching the flame. "She would have liked this," she says softly. You agree. At the market, the stalls are full again. Not bustling, but full. You can buy cherries now, and dried figs, and cheese wrapped in cloth. Children run between baskets laughing. You see a woman selling spices, cinnamon, clove, ginger, and you remember the scent of the fevered rooms, the way you once dabbed oil on your temples, hoping the smell would ward off the sweat. You hesitate before buying a packet of clove. Then you buy two, one for now, one to keep. You walk home past the square where musicians are playing again. They're not professionals, just a group of people with battered lutes and flutes, making a kind of joyful racket. A crowd gathers. Some people sway. One woman dances with her toddler in her arms, the child shrieking with delight. It's not a performance. It's a declaration. We're alive. We have lungs. We can sing again. That evening your sister draws them. 3 musicians on a bench, one with a flute held sideways, eyes closed. She hangs it beside her sketch of the fever cot. "We need both," she says. "The sickness and the song." You nod, because now you understand that remembering doesn't mean dwelling. It means placing. Setting the memory down beside everything else and saying, "You happened." But so did this. A new custom takes root in the city, a kind of quiet memorial. On the 1st of every month, people leave flowers outside the buildings where someone died. Not many, just 1 or 2. You begin to recognize the patterns. Tulips for children, rosemary for mothers, sunflowers for those who brought others comfort. You and your sister begin leaving time outside your parents' door. Not because it was their favourite, but because it grows easily and survives winter. The scholar who interviewed you returns. He brings a bound copy of the book he compiled, a mixture of stories, drawings, memories. He's called it The Year of the Sweats, a living chronicle. He's included one of your sister's drawings, a house, a bowl of soup, a candle in the window. She blushes when she sees it, then traces the lines with her finger. "It looks warmer than I remember," she says. "That's memory for you," the scholar replies. He leaves behind 2 copies, one for you, one for the library. You place yours beside the candlestick your father carved when you were little, and you light a flame beside it. Not because the room is dark, but because some things should be seen in firelight. Later that week, a group of young people organises a walk across the entire city, stopping at each district shrine, laying a flower at each one. They call it the Long Thread, and you join them. The walk takes hours. Your feet ache by the end. But the silence, the motion, the togetherness, it heals something. By the time you reach the final shrine, a boy begins to sing. The same hymn from the monument. Others join in. You don't sing, but you close your eyes and feel it echo in your chest. Back home, your sister has begun painting now, not just sketching. She's working on a mural for the orphanage. It depicts the city in layers: sky, rooftops, windows, faces. At the very centre, she's painted a hand holding another hand. No context, no background, just the gesture. She tells the children it's about care. One girl says, "It looks like someone not letting go." Your sister smiles. Exactly. Another week, the candle maker teaches you to shape hollow candles, used for secret messages. You roll notes inside them, light them, and wait for the message to emerge as the wax melts. Your sister writes one and gives it to you. "Don't read it till it burns all the way," she says. That night you sit by the window and watch the flame flicker down. When the scroll finally rolls free, you open it. It says, "You made the dark less scary. You don't cry, but you keep the note." You begin attending the new school that opened in the West End. The teacher there, one of the old nuns who left the convent after the worst wave, reads aloud from stories people wrote during the sweat. Some are hopeful, some are full of sorrow. All are real. One day, she reads a child's account of losing their mother. The room goes quiet. You feel the others breathing beside you. The girl next to you takes your hand without looking. Later, you write your own. Not for school, for yourself. You call it The Night the Streets Went Silent. It's not long, just a few pages. But it's honest. You give it to the scribe. He copies it into the city's archive. Weeks pass. The days grow long. You begin to sleep better. The dreams come less often. Or if they do, they aren't so sharp. Your sister laughs more now. You begin to speak of things beyond survival. Gardens, music, even plans for next winter. One afternoon she turns to you and says, "I think I want to become a healer." You blink. "I want to help people feel safe," she explains. "Not just better. Safe." You think about the smell of rosemary on cloth, the warmth of soup passed through a half-open door, the weight of her head on your shoulder that night in the dark. "You already do," you say, but she enrolls anyway. She begins studying under the apothecary, learning herbs, ointments, the pressure points on a hand. You watch her eyes light up as she reads, how her fingers move across the page like they're tracing something sacred. You walk the city more often now, sometimes alone, not out of sadness, but because you've begun to enjoy watching it live again. You sit on a bench and see lovers arguing, then laughing. You watch a man teach his dog to fetch. You listen to the sweep of brooms, the creak of wagons, the clang of a bell that doesn't mean death, just dinner. And sometimes, just sometimes, you find yourself forgetting. Not erasing, but forgetting in a gentle way. A merciful way. You forget the exact date your father fell ill. The name of the woman who brought bread every third day. The colour of the linens you burned. And that's okay. Because forgetting is also a kind of healing. You return to the river again, sit with your back against a tree. The city glows behind you. Rooftops catching gold in the late sun. You hear a lute playing somewhere. Laughter. Bells. A bird calls overhead. You close your eyes. You breathe. And you think, we have made it through. You wake before the sun and step outside into the dim blue hush of early morning. There's a weight in the air, not ominous, not heavy, just a stillness, as if the world is pausing for breath. The stones beneath your feet are cool, damp with dew, and the sky above you glows faintly, the shape of dawn stretching thin fingers across the rooftops. You walk not because you need to, but because you can, because walking still feels like proof. It has been months now since anyone whispered the words sweating sickness with fear. The plague has receded like a tide. But beneath the calm, something else stirs, an awareness that just as the sweat vanished, another shadow approaches. People speak of a pestilence moving across the continent, not the sweat. Something worse, something older, a name you've heard before but never knew to dread. The Black Death. You first hear it from a travelling merchant. His hands tremble as he unloads crates of dried fruit and fabric, his mouth dry from too many stories. He tells you of strange deaths in distant ports, of ships arriving with no one alive to moor them, of rats running from cargo holds, of boils and blood and breath that stinks of the grave. You listen. You don't speak. And for a long moment your breath catches in your throat. Not because you're sick, but because you remember. That night you sit with your sister on the floor beside the hearth. She's reading by candlelight, notes spread around her like wings. She doesn't look up when she says, "They're calling it the Great Mortality." You don't reply. You already know what she means. But this time things feel different. Not easier, not safer, but clearer. Because this time you know the shape of loss. You know how quickly the world can change, and you know what to do when it does. You see it in the way the city prepares, not with panic, but with purpose. The council holds meetings weekly now, open to the public. Not for speeches, but for planning. Healers gather herbs, not hoard them. Scribes record not just symptoms, but survival stories. The baker begins storing flour in jars sealed with wax. The candle maker teaches children how to twist wicks, how to pour evenly. The apothecary distributes cloth masks soaked in vinegar and rosemary. And no one forgets to light candles at dusk. There is no illusion of invincibility. But there is something stronger than that. There is memory. And memory, you find, can become armour. You help your sister prepare bundles of herbs, thyme, mint, yarrow. You deliver them house by house, not because they'll cure anything, but because people need to feel held. Because sometimes hope smells like rosemary. A child on the corner gives you a drawing. A house surrounded by bright yellow suns. You tape it to your window. A woman down the lane gives you a loaf of bread with a note tucked inside. We are not beginning again. We are continuing. You leave a ribbon on her gate the next day. The scribe asks to record your memories again. He says, "Someday this too will pass and they'll want to know how we stood." So you speak. You speak of the sweat and the silence and the sound of your sister's breath when you thought it might be her last. You speak of soup and songs and shrines, of small kindnesses and how they felt bigger than miracles, and he writes, "You begin gathering children each week to tell them stories, not of dragons or saints, but of real people. Of a girl who wrote every day, of a boy who tied wishes to a tree, of a candle that burned through the night and gave someone just enough light to hold on." They listen, wide-eyed. One asks, "Was it scary?" You nod. "But you're still here." "I am." "Will we be too?" You smile. "If we remember." As summer reaches its peak, the days shimmer with heat. The river runs low and lazy. People bathe in it again. They sing. They splash. You sit on the banks with your sister, watching as children play like no plague ever touched them. And yet, there's a quiet beneath the laughter. Not fear, awareness. Vendors in the market begin tying bundles of garlic to their carts. Not for sale, just hung like charms. Windows are adorned with pressed flowers. More people begin wearing herbs around their necks. These small acts aren't superstition, not really. They are memory made visible. You meet a woman who claims to have lived through the first great pestilence as a child. "I remember the bells," she says. "They rang for weeks." She shivers and places a coin under the leg of a crooked table, as though bracing against fate. You realize, listening to her, that you are now one of those people. Someone with stories. Someone who lived through what others only heard whispered in corners, and now you will carry them. Your sister draws again. This time not just scenes but maps. Maps of memory. One shows the city's shrines. Another shows the homes that baked bread during the sweat. Another marks every window that ever bore a candle. She hangs them in the square beneath glass, with labels written in steady, careful hand. The map of light, the map of bread, the map of memory. People stop to read them. Some weep, some add notes. One simply writes, "Because of you, we knew what to do." You receive letters now, tucked beneath your door, from people you helped without realizing. A woman who says the drawing your sister made of her husband is the only image she has left. A man who read your story aloud to his children during the worst weeks and told them, "We will be like this family. We will hold each other." A child who says the soup you gave her is the best thing she's ever tasted. You write them back. Because healing isn't just medicine, it's echo, it's voice returned. When the first confirmed death from the new pestilence reaches your city, the bells toll. But only once. And instead of panic there is motion, swift, quiet, intentional. Neighbours check on each other. Gardens are reinforced. Plans are made for care, for cooking, for singing. You and your sister prepare another bundle, this one for yourselves. Dried bread, salt, a sketch of your family, a small bottle of oil. Not because you plan to flee, but because having it ready makes you feel powerful. You leave it by the door. Then you walk out into the city again. The scribe is reading aloud from the Book of the Sweats in the square. Children sit in a circle around him. Adults listen from stoops and windows. He reads a line you recognize, one your sister wrote. "We do not forget the dark, but we braid it with light." And the crowd is silent. Then someone hums, then others join. and the city sings again. This time, you sing too. The heat hangs heavy as summer leans into its final weeks, thick and golden like honey left too long in the sun. You wake earlier now, not because of fear, but because the world is finally something you don't want to miss. Every dawn feels like a small gift, one you unfold slowly with each breath of warm air, each footstep on the sunlit stones. You and your sister have begun keeping a garden of your own. Not a grand one, just a narrow strip of soil behind the house, shaded in the early morning and sunlit in the afternoon. You planted it weeks ago, unsure if anything would take. Now green shoots nudge out from the earth, parsley, lavender and a single bright marigold. You water it every morning while your sister draws. Neither of you says much. You don't need to. The quiet is full. The city has settled into a rhythm. Bells ring again, not constantly, but at the proper times. The market fills and empties with ease. There are still new deaths. The pestilence has arrived, unmistakably. But something is different now. People do not flee in blind terror. They prepare. They share. They remember. You notice small rituals taking root. Neighbours leaving handkerchiefs soaked in vinegar on each other's steps. Children braiding garlic into ropes. Windowsill altars built from clay and cloth. These aren't the frantic, desperate acts of the sweating sickness. These are practiced, reverent, like a language the city has learned. The old herbalist down the street hosts a gathering each evening, 3 people at a time, no more, where she teaches what she knows, how to brew teas for calm, how to make pastes for fever, how to press flowers into memory. Your sister attends every 3rd night. She takes notes. She started her own recipe book, stitched together from scraps of parchment and thread. You flip through it sometimes, recipes and remedies, but also thoughts. She's titled it, In Case We Forget. A line in the margin catches your eye. This time, we are not unready. This time, we are not alone. One morning, a travelling healer visits the city. She comes cloaked in blue, her hands stained with turmeric and soot. She carries no luggage, only a long leather pouch full of vials and leaves. She speaks little, but when she does, the whole square listens. You watch her pause before each house marked during the sweats. She closes her eyes. She whispers. No one hears the words, but when she leaves, she places a single feather by the door. A mark of memory, of respect. Your sister speaks with her one afternoon and returns with a single word. Listen. You ask, to what? She smiles. To everything. You begin listening more. You hear the hush of flour being sifted in the bakery, the squeak of a wheelbarrow outside your window, the sigh your sister makes when she finishes a sketch, the murmur of strangers sharing bread in the square, the whisper of wind moving through the trees near the shrine. One afternoon the scribe asks you to help bind a book. You sit in his study, your fingers stiff with glue and ink, and he tells you he's archiving the names of the dead. Not just their deaths, but their lives. Not just numbers, but stories. We did this wrong last time, he says. We remembered the plague, but we forgot the people. You help him press the pages. You press gently, with care, like laying a body to rest. Your own story is there too now, tucked between pages of song lyrics and market tallies, stories of births and rebuildings. It's part of something larger, something lasting. The plague continues, people still die. But something holds. The city holds. You hold. There is fear, yes, but it does not rule. It walks beside you quietly, like a shadow. But the sun still rises. Your sister draws a new mural, her most ambitious yet. This one spans the side of a building near the fountain. It's not of sickness, not of shrines. It's of people, 100 faces, everyone different. Some young, some old, some clearly drawn from life. In the centre, 2 hands holding each other across the divide. The mural takes weeks. People stop by daily to watch her work. Some offer suggestions. Others bring her food. One child sits at her feet each afternoon and tells her stories of her parents, both gone now. Your sister sketches their faces into the crowd, quietly, without fanfare. When she finishes, the city holds a small ceremony. No speeches, just songs, candles, a moment of silence, and then laughter. Because laughter, you've learned, is sacred too. The next day, someone leaves a note at the base of the mural. We live because we learn to stay. Summer turns to autumn, leaves fall in sheets of gold and copper. The city begins to smell of smoke and apples, of cinnamon and clay. It's a new season, but not just in weather. You can feel it, in how people look at each other, in how no one walks alone. Even the cemetery has changed. Graves are marked now not just with names, but with ribbons, with drawings, with offerings. People visit not to weep, but to remember. One afternoon you find yourself at your father's grave. You kneel. You place a sprig of thyme, a curl of your sister's hair, a folded note that reads, "We are still growing." Then you sit for a while, not speaking, just breathing. Back home, your sister's reading by the fire. You tell her where you've been. She nods and reaches for your hand. "I think," she says, "we're finally starting to feel real again." You don't know what to say, so you squeeze her hand. That evening she gives you a new candle. "For the new season," she says. You light it. Watch the flame. A neighbour knocks with a pot of stew. Another brings wood for the fire. You pass them each a piece of dried fruit in return. The exchange is silent, mutual, warm. You dream again that night, not of fear but of fields, of light, of voices singing from open windows. You wake smiling. Winter will come. You know that. The pestilence may worsen before it fades. There may be more names to add to the book, more candles to light, but this time you are not lost in the dark. You carry light with you. You always will. So now, my friend, let your shoulders soften. Feel how the weight begins to lift, just slightly, with every slow breath. Tonight you've walked through a story not of destruction, but of return. A world battered, bruised, but not broken. You've seen how grief sits beside joy, how fear can live next to hope, and how we, somehow, continue. You've wandered quiet streets, heard candles crackle, felt the hush of memory as it stretches across time like threads on a loom. The sweating sickness may be history now, but the courage it called forth, that still lives, in stories, in gardens, in your own quiet heart. And isn't that comfort? That even in the darkest winters of the past, people still found their way. With time on the windowsill, with drawings on the walls, with a bowl of soup passed gently through a door. So wherever you are tonight, whether it's morning in the city or midnight in the countryside, know this. You are part of a long, quiet chain of resilience, and you are not alone. Let the past fade gently now, like candle smoke curling into the rafters. Let your breath slow. Let the stillness wrap around you like a warm shawl. You've made it through, we've made it through, and tomorrow the sun will rise again. Sweet dreams.